The opinions and statements made by the guests of the Success in Practice podcast are their own, and I do not endorse or accept responsibility for their positions. Any information given by myself or the guests is educational in intention and not to be taken as medical advice. If you choose to act on the content involved in the podcast, you do so at your own risk. Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Success in Practice podcast. Today, I'm joined by Karolina Kowalczyk. Have I said that right, Karolina? Very good. Okay, Karolina Kowalczyk. Karolina was first introduced to osteopathy during high school after experiencing back pain, much like many of the stories we've heard on this podcast. The holistic approach to body and health deeply resonated with Karolina, sparking a lifelong passion for osteopathy. Born and raised in the western suburbs of Melbourne, Karolina has a strong connection to her community and is dedicated to improving the health and well-being of the local community as well. She takes a predominantly structural approach to osteopathy and to her treatments, and has a special interest in osteopathy for pregnancy and female health. Fluent in Polish, Karolina has built a strong following within the greater Polish community, providing care that is both culturally and linguistically, I should say, inclusive. As a director of Live Well Health Centre, which she founded in 2013, Karolina plays a key role in shaping the next generation of osteopaths. She's very committed to mentoring early career practitioners, fostering a supportive and enriching environment where they can grow into confident and skilled osteopaths. Beyond her professional life, Karolina is a busy mother of two children. Karolina, welcome to the podcast. We've been trying to set this up for a little while now, and I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very excited. This is, the only podcast I've actually watched quite religiously. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm fortunate to have you as a avid watcher, and now obviously somebody who's a contributor as well. So we're quite blessed to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to say, I've got to mention this because I'm a big Seinfeld fan, and Karolina's married name is Vanderlei, and
I have to correct you there. It's actually not. My Facebook sort of alter ego is Vanderlei.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
so
if only that was true.
So I was hoping that somewhere in that brief introduction would be, that she was formerly a latex salesman, but
funny. No, and it's just one of those funny things because my husband was always a Vanderlei on Facebook, and so when I married him, I decided to take that on as well.
That's awesome.
So, yes,
that's awesome.
I know, right? But not many people get it, so it's good.
Well, I got it definitely, and I almost put it. I mean, I'll put it in there, right? I'll put it into your. But I'm glad you corrected me. We've got to get that right.
That's okay.
So if anybody's searching for an osteopath named Karolina Vanderlei, you're not going to find her.
Maybe on Facebook.
Maybe on Facebook. That's right. Anyway, let's get started with that, and that's a good little segue. Tell us about you, Karolina. Tell us about you growing up, early days, early childhood. You said that you're kind of very intertwined within the Polish community. I think people are interested in that background. Tell us about your background growing up. Tell us about your school years, your formative years, tell us about those years of you kind of growing up.
Big question, Sammy.
Yeah.
But no, I'm Karolina. I'm 35. I have been osteo for a long time. A lot of people as 35s, I don't think I've been osteo for a while, but I think it's my 14th year being an osteo, because I was one of those that got into osteo when I was 17, did the work straight away. So 5 years, I was already qualified at 22, 23. And then I also weirdly sort of have owned my own business for about 12 years as well. So I feel like I've put in the reps already early in my career, but it's been good. So yeah, as you sort of mentioned in the intro, I'm very much a Westie, I'd like to refer myself as. So was born and bred sort of Deer Park. If anyone knows in Melbourne, it's a bit of a rougher side of town, but I'm very proud of it. So my parents were both migrants from Poland. I think pretty similar to a couple of stories I've heard on the podcast actually. Hey, and I feel like a bit of hard work stemmed from there. What else do you want to do? Yeah, so my parents both came not really knowing much about much. My first language was definitely Polish. But yeah, did well at school, enjoyed science, enjoyed health. And then when it came to about, I don't know, it must have been about 16, 17, started shopping around careers and did sort of a lot of the leaps and bounds that a lot of us have done. Looked into chiro, looked into physio, looked into radiography even. And then I met an osteo who, oh my God, but anyway, I met an osteo who, I don't know, it just felt like all the pieces had come together. I had a consult with her, and it just all made sense. So when it came to putting in my preferences and everything when I was 17, it's crazy to think I was so young when I got into the course. But yeah, got into osteo and haven't really looked back since.
Let me take you back a little bit. So you
Please.
mentioned that your parents immigrated from Poland,
I did.
and you were born in Melbourne,
Australia.
in
Yep.
Australia.
Yep.
And so growing up, your parents, did they decide to live where they lived because of the Polish community? Was there a strong Polish community in that part of?
Definitely. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah. So I think I had like a distant cousin that of my dad's that first came to Melbourne. And so
Mm.
when I think my dad was a refugee for a while. I think he was trying to, in Poland, they had to do 2 years of like consignment. We had to do 2 years permanent sort of, and it was sort of a make or break. So he quickly escaped Poland. He must have been 18 as well. Um, Went into a refugee camp for a while and finally got a ticket. I think it was by Caritas and got a ticket to go. And I think he had a choice of either to come to America or Australia. And he chose Australia because he had some long distant cousin that lived in Melbourne. So yeah, and there definitely was a following or a community already
Mm.
around here. And that's how we've sort of stayed around here.
And he met your mum here?
No, he actually met my mum over there, but I think there was some love letters exchanged, and long story short, she ended
Isn't
up
that
coming down
sweet?
and yeah, yeah, so,
It's good because everything's on DM now, right?
absolutely, yeah. It's crazy to think. It's crazy to think. My mother, I don't know, my European mother, that's very strict. I can't imagine if I was the same age and deciding to chase a boy across the world,
Yeah.
Australia. I can't imagine how her parents would have felt.
Well, I guess, I mean, leaving Australia is a bit different to leaving Poland in those days, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
a very different. And so I want to ask you about that.
Yeah.
I guess leaving a part of the world that was a little bit, I guess, maybe difficult to live in and
Yeah.
difficult to raise a family and to make a career and having all those aspirations kind of not being there for you. Was that something that your parents did they kind of raise you in a way to appreciate,
I would say
I guess,
so, for
yeah?
sure. And I think we've definitely been bred into hard work and definitely been bred into appreciating everything we've got. I also think
Mm,
my parents sort of started from nothing and had to grow themselves a lot. So I think, you can't help but have some of that rub off on you as well. And I do think have a lot to, I think that has a lot to do with where
mm,
I'm at career and all that sort of stuff.
right. I'll come back to that when I ask you
Yeah.
another question later on. But I want to ask you, being at school and
Yes.
being, I guess, maybe English was a second language for you. I assume your
Yes.
parents would have spoken Polish at
Yes.
home. What was that like? Was school something that you felt was a melting pot for you? Did you kind
Yeah,
of,
I think in primary school it definitely was. It was a bit to get used to and things, just
mm,
particularly because of the background. But I was lucky. I'm a middle child, so lucky. I think my sister had the harder path to walk there. But yeah, just the usual.
hmm
Yeah, it is just different. But I also think in the West there was also a lot of ethnicities around, so it wasn't super uncommon either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you show any signs of kind of enjoying anything to do with the human body at that high school time?
Definitely high school. I think that's sort of when I really got into. I think I've always been drawn to like maths and science and those sorts of things, but definitely
Yeah.
had a strong interest in health. And I think it's just sort of that late teens where you start to look after yourself a little bit more, start to look into things a little bit more. So I felt like osteo was a natural marriage between the two, like
Yeah.
my quite scientific brain and, people and health.
Right. And when you were, I guess you would have been about 16 or even 17 at the time when you were
Yeah,
choosing, which is very difficult to think about, choosing a career at 17.
yeah,
Like, wow,
yeah.
kids, in
The one
these
that you're
days.
stuck with this long. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. And so you mentioned earlier that you looked at chiro, you looked at osteopathy, you looked
Yep.
at some other things.
Yeah.
Radiology was one of them.
Yeah.
What really clinched it for you? I mean, I know you'd seen an osteopath, but I mean, you knew what radiologists did. You probably knew
Yes.
what chiropractors did.
Yes.
What was the clincher for you?
Yeah, a couple
That,
of things. I think
yeah.
when I was 16, 17, I think when I was doing my little scope around trying to get this work experience, a lot of practitioners were like, oh, we can't really offer a work experience, but come in and get a treatment. And I definitely feel like at that time I was seeing a chiropractor, and I know it seems very silly, but like I would have been earning about $12 an hour working at Donut King. And this chiropractor was like, just asked me to come back and come back. And I was just after work experience. But I think it just left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth about the ethics of it. And, my mum very, yeah, like I think she helped a little bit with those appointments, but she, like I was working for it,
Yeah.
literally flipping donuts at Donut King. So it just felt really unethical. And then when I think her name's Leanne, when I met her, it all just made a lot more sense. And I think for me, all the things that I enjoyed about physio and chiro, it sort of just like the stock standard patient does. It all just sort of melted into one, and it sort of made a lot more sense than the others did. Like I felt like the other professions I had a little bit of issue or something. It just didn't sit right. Whereas osteo just felt like the perfect mix.
Yeah.
And I definitely think once I got in, it was definitely love.
You weren't taking donuts with you to see the chiropractor, were you?
No, I should have. Maybe she would have been nicer to me. Maybe
Well,
she would have
that's what.
realized the blood, sweat, and tears that came into those appointments.
Well, I don't want to. Oh, maybe you went in there smelling like cinnamon and sugar, and that's why she kept you coming back.
Maybe it
I
was
always
just me. I don't know.
I always have this thing when a patient walks in, especially a female patient, and I think there's this like vanilla smelling body butter that I think girls put on their, it's like a body lotion, right?
Yes.
And they all come in these different kind of smells. Like there's a vanilla one and a coconut one, and they always happen to come around lunchtime, just before
Yes.
you're really hungry.
I think that's when your tummy's really on and just looking for any sort of smell.
Yeah, is there like a vanilla cake somewhere in the room here? Yeah, so yeah, it might have been hard for him to
Maybe to say no
concentrate.
to me.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
that's the Carolina effect. You can quote that here, hey?
Definitely. Okay, so you chose osteopathy,
Yes.
and when you spoke to your very hardworking immigrant parents and you
Yes.
told them, "Mum, Dad, I'm doing osteopathy," did
Good.
they just turn around and say,
Yes.
"What's
I
that?"
have a quote for you. My
Yeah,
mum said, "I've never heard of that. There's no money in that." And
good,
park it. Yeah.
good advice.
Yeah. So,
It comes from a good place.
absolutely. No, but honestly, now my mum's very proud of the fact that I'm an osteopath, and I do
Yeah.
hold that comment against her because I remember having my VTAC guide and she said, "There's no money in that. Don't do that."
How did you sell it to her?
Uh, I don't know. I think I've always been a bit strong-willed, and I think I probably just did it anyway.
Did you give him the doctor title?
I probably, and I
That
said I
would have.
really like learning, and I really like, so 5 years at, uni is really, really good for me. Yeah, I feel like for
And
me, yeah, even the fact that, family life, once you get it right, it suits family life, the appointment-based work,
yes,
good. Yeah.
yeah, good. All right. So your parents are on board now, and you're off
Yes.
to university. You get
Yes.
there, or you go to an open day, right?
Yes.
What did you learn, kind of, about osteopathy in that time between high school and the time that you started university? Did you go and do your research? Did you?
I did do my research. I did go to the open day, but I honestly don't have too many like strong
Mm.
thoughts about that. But I do remember my interview because I was still in that. I
Oh,
think I was
yes.
one of the last few that had the interview,
Are
and I
you
remember
at
that being
RMIT or
at
VU?
RMIT. Yeah,
RMIT,
yeah.
right.
So we
Was Ray Myers still
yes,
right?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So
So tell us about that, because that's interesting, the interview, because it's been on the podcast with other people who have mentioned that the
yes,
interview was pretty grueling. Tell us about
yeah.
that.
I honestly think it had a lot to do with the passion and a lot to do with what I think osteopathy is now, and probably I think part of it forms like my rants to my staff about what an osteopath should be. Because I remember,
Mm,
even now, I remember it being very much a discussion about, as an osteopath, you are a leader in your community.
mm,
You are. So I think we had to prove, like, and I was 17 at the time, so I had to prove how I was already a leader in my community and how I could show that. I
yeah.
remember quite distinctly having to remember the four principles. And I don't know, I swear I had a book about osteo. I think it was like I swear I borrowed it from the library. And I swear my dad was driving me off to Bundoora. And those photographic memories that you're so grateful for. I
Hmm.
remember reading the four principles, not thinking that I'd read it, and then got into the interviews and I managed to spit it out. I swear that's probably how I got in. Because they must have thought I was really, really into it, but it was just a stroke of luck that I happened to pick up the right book. But already at 17, like I had to quote that, which, yeah, I think is unusual. I don't think, the new grads that I'm hearing now would know the four principles.
Right.
And
We'll
I
get
knew
to
that
that.
at 17. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
All right. So you got there, and the interview process went well for you because it is. I think they would be a lot tougher on.
It was four on the panel or something. I can't remember who it
Yeah,
was, but it was pretty intense.
yeah, and I think, like I said, that would be a lot tougher on a 17-year-old kid
Yes.
because they would be quite protective of making sure that someone's not there just to muck around and
Of
kind
course.
of, figure out what they want to do.
Yeah.
They wanted, from what I understand, even when I went through at UWS, the people that did have interviews were quite kind of like they went through a bit of a grueling process.
Yeah.
All right, so you get there
Yeah.
and you get to your first day, your first week,
Yeah.
your first experience in osteopathy.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What was that like? Was that something that surprised you? Was it something that you made you feel really happy to be a part
Yeah, I
of?
loved it.
What?
I thought, yeah, I finally, when I got into uni, I was like, I finally found my tribe. Like, I finally found the people. So like a lot of the other people, like uni was pretty intense when we started. Like I remember, I think it's like 36 hours or something all through the day. You sort of had like a lot of contact hours. I
Hmm.
remember at the time I was like, I have to find another job. I have to find a job that's after 6 p.m. because there's no way I could work any office type hours and do this
Hmm.
course. But it was really fun. Met some really amazing people. A lot of them I'm still good friends with now. The course I really enjoyed. You could tell a lot of passion in the lecturers and people that were teaching the
Hmm.
material. I just loved it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And I'm assuming you'd left Donut King by then.
had I? Maybe not. I reckon I was still there a little bit. But then I got into like proper hospo where I was like working till
Yeah.
3 a.m. so I could
Yeah.
put petrol in my car to go to Bundoora, etc.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
tell us about that because that's always I think the student struggle is essential for I think just for kind of cutting your teeth, right?
Yes,
Like
of course.
yeah. So tell us
Yeah,
about that. What was your uni struggle like? What was your uni struggle like in terms of work, getting the right balance between earning an income
for
versus
sure.
making sure your studies are done correctly and being on
Yeah.
top of things?
Yeah, well, I never had any like student allowance or anything like that. So I did a lot of work and I remember, my pay was like somewhere between the $10 to $15 mark. It was really quite grim
Mm,
when I look back. And a lot of it was hospitality and things just to sort of work around uni.
mm,
Um, but yeah, so luckily enough, my parents bought me a car. But for the first, because I was 17, I didn't turn 18 till sort of like mid first semester. So my mum and dad had to like drive me to Bundoora, or I'd catch the train, which took 2 hours because I had to sort of do a big loop around Melbourne to get
mm.
there. So life got a lot easier once I had a car. But yeah, it definitely was a struggle. And I definitely, was burning the candle from both ends, trying to sort of make it all work. But I think you just did.
Mm.
You also, went to pub crawls on a Wednesday and showed up to uni on a Thursday. It was just part of the culture.
Yeah, yeah,
Couldn't do it
definitely.
now.
So, well, I mean, now you can't do it now. I think because it's you should be able to do it now because everything's online, right? Like you would
Yeah,
have a bit more time, but strangely enough, I think living expenses is a lot more. I think
absolutely.
it's a lot more expensive these days.
Yes.
So, if you do have some spare time and you're a student out there, my advice to you is to get to work.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think it must make, even like when we sort of look to hire and things, people that have worked before, have a bit of work ethic, get it. I think it helps in every facet of your life. Hey,
Mm, mm.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely those struggle years build a lot
yes,
of character
yes,
because whatever you think that's going to happen after 5 years of study, like magically all the doors are going to open up for you. That's not the
yes,
case.
yes, of
You still
course,
got to, I think it gets harder once you start
yes,
your own practice or once you go and work as an associate.
yeah,
It's a lot harder than actual university and you've got to put in the work. So it's
for
good to
sure.
cut your teeth with some hard work. So tell us about some of the influential people, I guess, the people that influenced you in terms of osteopathy
Yeah,
whilst you're at university. So who
yeah.
were the ones that really, do you remember that really
Yes, so
stuck out for
I've
you?
written a list just in case because I didn't want to discredit anyone because I think there was some big people that had a big part to play. I actually messaged a couple of my osteo friends. I'm like, I'm on this podcast, make sure, and then we had a bit of discussion. And it depends because some people were really influenced by other people. I'm like, oh, I wasn't even taught by that guy or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, the big ones for me were Paula Henderson, Margaret Matthews. I think a lot of people mentioned her. Nala Karim, Mick Kelly for HVLA
Yep.
and Lisa Barker, she's amazing. Anna Massingham, also amazing. And obviously Ray as well, because he was sort of like the lead the whole time. So,
Yeah.
yes, was quite cruel on some of our assignments, I remember, but it's good. Made
I
us all
think,
passionate osteos.
yeah, and I think in the long run, it's a lot more beneficial.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
All right.
Yeah.
And tell us about some of the ways that those people influenced you, like in terms of thought process, in terms of how you viewed things. Was I know you said Mick Kelly in terms of technique. A
Yes.
lot of people credit Mick for teaching them HVLA
Yes.
over at RMIT. Tell us about, I know that you mentioned the people's names, but tell us about how they actually molded you. Like, what do you think was
Yeah, I
so
think
important
everyone's a
about
little
that?
bit different. I don't know. I think, yeah, like Paula Henderson, Margaret Matthews, I would be like, they probably taught me like the history of osteopathy. They're probably like the core teachers right at the start of the course
Mm-hmm.
that had a lot to do with like more like the philosophical understandings of what osteopath is and sort of the career that we're about to undertake.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, Mick Kelly, obviously for his just technique and things. Lisa Barker, she did a lot of like our case studies and our understanding. I think she was the first sort of clinician that really sort of made it real for us a little bit. Um, Sort of was willing to sort of challenge okay, we learn this, but this is what we actually do in practice, and sort of have that sort of dialogue, which I reckon we had mostly a lot to do with her like fourth, fifth year, and it was really refreshing because you get, some of the stuff we learned, and especially when we went through, I think they were sort of treating us a bit more like medical doctors than osteopaths. Like
Right.
for us, we were treated more like we had to understand how to diagnose Parkinson's. That was one of my last exams, how to diagnose Parkinson's disease. How would I
Mm.
deliver a Parkinson's disease diagnosis to a patient, which is not in our scope of practice at all. And yet that
Well,
was our last sort of, things that we were criteriaed on. And it was funny because then you go out to uni, and this is sort of my era. I do think you come out and be like, okay, oh, what's a facet sprain? Because we've
mm,
spent so much time deep diving on these terrible medical conditions that are probably beyond our scope, which we have to understand. But I
mm.
think the basic stuff that we see every day, we probably didn't put the emphasis on, which took a bit
Yeah.
of relearning and things as well.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, even if you're 1,000% sure that somebody has Parkinson's disease, I
Yeah.
don't think you're the one, or the osteopath is the one that's going to be sitting them down and saying,
Yes.
hey,
And I do think the
you
course
know,
has changed a lot since then, but I definitely think that was a big focus for us.
mm,
And I think, and I totally get it from both sides. I think it's worthwhile that we understand
yeah.
all the ins and outs, but I think, our craft as osteopaths and, really making sure that that was strong was also important as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to pick up on those things and go, hey, you need to go and see your GP. You might write a
Yes,
quick letter and say, this is what I found.
for
Please
sure.
manage, you know.
Yes.
And then, yeah, so I agree with you there. I think definitely those things we spent a lot of time on, and I think the shift towards a more medical approach, a more biomedical approach, I guess, made that a bit more evident and at the
Yes.
forefront of education. So,
Yeah,
but you're right. I think that we need to know the things that you're better off learning than the stuff that you see 90% of the time and
for
getting that
sure.
right.
Yes. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's going to really help you. And
Yeah.
obviously, just know the 10% and know when to refer off.
Sure, yeah. And that's where I think even like student clinics sometimes, as good as it is,
Mm,
sometimes you see these chronic patients with files this big,
yeah.
but they're not necessarily the patients that you'll necessarily see in private practice as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so we'll get into that. But that's where I think interning and things is also a really great idea for osteopaths.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
definitely. I think the internship model is something that we've probably haven't looked at closely enough and really invested in it. But I think
yeah,
that's something that I've discussed previously on the podcast, and I think a lot of people are starting to wake up to how important that is. And it might be actually the future of education to really cut costs down for the universities because
well,
they're becoming
absolutely.
yeah, they're becoming businesses, and they
Yeah,
want to cut their costs. And if we can take a bit of the burden off them
for
on the
sure.
clinical side of things, then why not? I think then we can at least control what we offer students and how they graduate.
Yeah,
All right, so we've discussed your university time.
yes,
You I guess graduated in 2000 or you've been out for 14 years now, so I'm assuming
yeah,
2010, 2011 you
yes,
would have been
yes.
right.
Yes,
Okay,
2011. Yeah, I went.
2011. And
Yeah.
then, so what were you thinking then? Like, I need to be an associate. I need to go and cut my teeth somewhere and kind
Yes.
of learn. How did you decide where to work?
Yep.
At that time, so the question I have for you is at that time, was it a time where you could choose? Were people really saying, come work for me, come work for me? Or was it an employer's market? Were they kind of picking and choosing who they wanted?
I think it was an employee's market. But I think the conditions then were quite different, I guess, from, yeah, I don't know. But it was quite different. Like I signed my first contract in May when I was due to graduate in December. And I
Mm.
already built so I was already interning at the clinic, was already building but I was already committed to the clinic
Right.
like more than 6 months before, which
Yeah.
is quite different to what I'm hearing these days of what normal is.
Yeah.
Um, and I think a lot of people had a job lined up by July that they were going to go into in sort of January. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah,
Well,
um,
that's definitely an employee's market.
yeah, for
If you're able to
sure.
secure a job
Yes,
that early, then yeah, definitely.
yes. But I
I
think
think.
obviously then it was sort of trying to work out what the right opportunity was. There was
Mm.
mostly contracting at the time.
Hmm.
And I guess there was a lot of, people obviously everyone's happy to have a contractor, but not necessarily being able to provide the work
Mm.
then. So was I'd already been working at an osteo clinic, and I was planning on working at this one clinic of the owners that I love, but this other clinic came up when I was sort of looking around, and the lady who owned the clinic was about to go on maternity leave. So in my head, I was like, bingo, like, it was
Yeah.
busy. She seemed really, yeah, down to earth, all those sorts of things.
Slam dunk.
Um, yeah, so especially maternity leave, that was a really exciting
Mm.
opportunity for me. Yeah, so started interning with her for probably the year before,
Right.
and then started working for her in January. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And are you able to mention her name? Is she
Yeah, yeah,
some?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I worked for Kelly Mumford in Keilor.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And how long did you spend there?
So I was there for 2 years, or
Okay.
it's probably almost 2.5, especially when you consider the interning. Yeah.
And I
So
guess so. So you interned for about 6 months, and then
yes,
you worked there as an associate for 2 years.
yes, yes.
Okay. And so tell us about that experience. What is it that you think? Was there a turning point for you there, or was it like a gradual kind of easing your way into it, or did you kind of like? Was there an aha moment where you go, okay, once I've done this, now I know that I can really accelerate my patient retention or my
Bit
patient
of
base?
bit of everything. I honestly, hand on heart, I never wanted to open a business.
Yep.
It was never a thing I wanted to do, never something I aspired to. Long story short, with that arrangement, it ended pretty quickly as she started to convert us to employees. And
Hmm.
just the way that she did it, it just wasn't, and I don't think, yeah, we can go into that, but it just was done very abruptly. And so
Mm.
me and the another associate there um, ceased working there on the same day, and suddenly we
Right.
had to come up with a business.
Okay.
Me and yeah, my now business partner Guyan, we were both out of a job on the same day. So that's where Livewell Health Centre or Livewell Osteopathy then started. But I think if it wasn't for that, we're both very happy working as associates. We both really love the community there. Um,
Mm.
both very humble. I still think we still had a lot to learn. So yeah, I look back, I'm like,
Okay.
there's so much to learn.
So let me take you back to that
Yes,
pivotal time, I guess, where you made
yes,
that, or not, maybe it wasn't your decision, but just out of circumstance.
yes,
And what you mentioned was that the lady that you were working with decided to move from a contractor setup to an employee setup.
yes.
And so was it a setup that you thought that you had taken a step backwards from? Like, so was it something that you go, if I take this employee setup, it's a step back for me, or was it just
At the
something?
time, definitely, and I can stand by that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely different to the models that are out there right now. It would have been a huge pay cut for me at that
Yeah.
point. And I was already quite successful at the time.
Right.
So yes, and I also think there wasn't very much back and forth with these negotiations too. It
Yeah.
was This is sort of already getting into the territory you might have to edit
That's
out.
fine. That's fine.
But there wasn't any negotiation.
Yeah.
And when it wasn't going away, our arrangement was shut off very quickly
Right.
by our employer.
Okay. So from
Yes,
what I understand, that she had a certain objective
yes,
and if
yes,
you didn't fit that objective, and
absolutely.
there's nothing wrong with that. Like,
Yes. No, yes,
everybody's
yes,
entitled to, it's their business. Everybody's
yes,
entitled to kind of have what they want to happen because they're the
yes,
one that's out. I mean, you're a business owner now,
yes,
and
I
you
get
understand,
it.
you're the one that's outlaying the risk, and
Yes,
so you
exactly.
see what you require, and if the people that are working
Absolutely.
for you can't do that, then
Yes.
Right. And so, I mean, we can discuss that. We can discuss contractor versus employee and talk
Yes.
about all that. But
Yes.
okay, so
Yes,
that
but that's
then,
how our history, the long and short of it is that's
yeah,
how Live Well Osteopathy was born.
yep,
Yeah, we're sort of only 2 years out, but yeah, we both worked very hard at the clinic, both had a very stable,
mm,
big patient network
right,
that really did follow us. A lot of my patients today, I know from my very
yeah,
first weeks in Kilo, and that's what patients
right.
do. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, no, patients do that. They will
yeah,
follow you if
yeah,
they, and this is the thing about trying to own patients.
yes,
That's a bit of a, yeah, red herring.
yes,
I mean, clinics have a right to retain patients,
yes.
but ultimately nobody owns the patient. I
No,
think,
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
And so let me take you back to those 2 years where you worked as an associate, and let's talk
yes.
about some clinical stuff.
Yes.
What were the biggest learning points for you in those first 2 years? What do you think you really learned that you still keep with you today that you think had a massive impact on your early success? Because it's the early success is really important. I feel
Yes.
that if you don't make headway in those first 2 years, you're probably never going to get there.
Yes.
You're probably going to stay at a certain level and just buzz along.
Yes.
But those first 2 years are really crucial.
Yes.
And if your skill set doesn't really improve and you don't get the process right, you're going to really struggle. It doesn't mean you're going to get everything right, but you need to get
Yes.
most of it right, I think.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
what do you think were the big learning points for you in those first 2 years that you've made a big impact to your success?
I think our principal osteopath, she was a VU grad then, and she learnt things quite different to the way we'd learnt things. I think at the time, RMIT was probably a little bit old school, a lot of somatic dysfunction, a lot of, like sort of more the wishy-washy sort of osteopathy, whereas I think VU at the time was a little bit more, um, yeah, to the point, it's a facet sprain and or maybe treating like seeing common things commonly all the time. I do think like
Mm,
we saw a lot of volume. Like I was busy right from the start to the end. I was working big hours, seeing lots and lots of patients, so getting a lot of experience. But I think the big thing was just almost unlearning or sort of making a little bit more practical the stuff that we've learnt at uni and making it into something that really needed to exist in health,
mm.
in Melbourne. Yeah.
Okay. And were there any points that you took away from you in terms of a process? Like, did you refine your process really well in those first 2 years? Was it a different, you mentioned that there's a difference between the somatic dysfunction viewpoint that you got at RMIT versus the, I guess, more direct model
Yes.
that you saw out of a VU principal, VU
Yes.
educated principal.
Yep.
Um, did that offer you any advantages in terms of putting together treatment plans, understanding, being a bit more direct to the point of what's going on?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's just sort of, also meeting the patient's expectations of what they wanted from treatment and things,
Mm,
working all those things like, working on your skill set as far as HPLA and soft tissue, but also just building a process, building a base that you sort of
mm,
go, you're not having to scram together your treatment plan. You sort of have a decent base that you can sort of, look after most people or at least cover most bases, those sorts of things.
yeah, it's funny. I'm a UWS graduate, and
Yes.
I graduated in 2003, and I remember when we first got into our clinical setting at
Yeah.
university.
Yeah.
And even before that, we had a lot of, or a few, well, not a lot, but we had a few people that had previously graduated from RMIT
Yeah.
come and teach us.
Yeah.
I think Liz Howard, Kate, um, I forget the last name, but anyway, and they were very, as you said, they were very somatic dysfunction orientated,
Yes.
really talked in a philosophical way,
Yes.
understanding the different movements, talked about the pelvis and the
Yes.
spine and certain, and and that was great. I thought that's what we got as young students in our
Yes.
first year in terms of philosophical application and principles. So that kind of, and we saw the RMIT graduates there as massive superstars. Like
Yes.
when they came to teach us, and we thought, oh my God, this person's graduated from RMIT. We were like in awe.
Very cool. And a
Yeah,
lot
it
of
was
this stuff
very
we taught
cool.
was like, the stuff that's sort of hundreds of years old,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
lasted the test of time. It's awesome.
yeah. So it was. So we really had this kind of awe about RMIT,
Yeah.
and that's part of the reason why I'm so a little bit I guess, a bit disappointed with current models of education, but we'll save that for a future conversation.
Yeah.
But anyway, back in those days, like I said, it was we were quite in awe of it. And then when we got to our clinical setting, we did have a couple of VU graduates who had become clinical supervisors and
Yeah.
some teachers. And I noticed the approach was very, very different. Like
Yeah.
it was night and day, you
Yeah.
know. The VU approach was very direct, very primary diagnosis focused, very tissue focused.
Yeah.
You know, this is the tissue that's sensitizing your pain, central
Yes.
sensitization, neural pathways, looking at all those kind of factors that I guess drawing the dots back to a specific tissue that's sensitizing what's going on,
Yeah.
and just talking about that. And
Yeah.
that's all you could talk about to a VU trained practitioner. You couldn't talk about the pelvis. You couldn't talk about standing flexion tests. You couldn't
Yeah.
talk about Friot laws and somatic dysfunction and so
Yeah.
forth. It was just something that if you mentioned it, they would
Yeah.
just palm it
And I
off.
think
It
that was
wasn't.
my experience, but it also was a better because I remember like even writing your first couple of letters and you're sending a letter out to a doctor saying, well, I think this patient has a somatic dysfunction of their lumbar spine. And I remember Kelly was like, no doctor understands what that
Yeah.
means. You need to talk their language a little bit more. So yeah, but I also think some of the RMIT, the woo-woo type stuff is really cool. It's really cool,
Yeah.
and I guess you've got to be in the right frame and also have all the background, all the history and all that sort of stuff to really understand why it's cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. It is cool. I think both have their
Yes.
place.
Yeah,
I think,
definitely.
but I
But
definitely
it was
think,
a big learning curve for me coming out of uni, feeling like, uni, like I got my handle of it. And then all of a sudden, your sort of principal osteopath's telling you you're writing letters wrong. You're calling the thing that you're treating the wrong thing. It was, it's a bit to get your head around.
yeah, one model really taught you how to treat, the other model taught you how to diagnose.
Yes, for sure.
Right.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
that's what I found that
Yeah.
one model really, like the somatic dysfunction model, really
Yes.
taught you how to apply a really good treatment.
Yeah.
And even if you had your eyes closed, you can apply
Yes.
a great treatment and people would walk out of there feeling better.
Absolutely.
And ultimately that's what patients want. But I think to get them in the door and keep them in the door, you need to have a really solid diagnosis.
For sure.
And I guess the VU approach gave you a really good primary diagnosis,
Yes.
to understand the tissue and the pain and the science behind that.
For sure.
And I think the RMIT approach gave you a really good understanding of the somatic dysfunction and the underlying causes.
And I still think I sort of treat, like I can't treat a body without treating or at least addressing a pelvis, which like the newer, like a lot of osteos find that really weird. I'm like, that's just what we were taught. Like you just,
it's not new either. Like
Yeah.
it's not the thing. It's not ideas in the sky. Like there's
but it is to some, some people you're like, oh, and you just got, and it all really makes sense. Yeah. So
it does make sense, and
Yes.
and it's very rational, and it does make sense. And I guess when you break it down, it's something that you can then formulate a treatment around. So it's very required, and it's a point of difference because I think the primary diagnostic stuff, anybody can learn that.
Yes.
Right, and you can have other ARPA regulated health practitioners learn and do that.
Yeah.
You can't have other ARPA registered health practitioners do osteopathy.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's really important that we keep that as a point of difference.
For sure.
Right. So, okay. So it looks like university was good to you. Your first couple of years was good to you in terms of a clinical point of view. It seemed like your tumultuous exit out of associateship and into private practice, although being tumultuous, ultimately probably was a good thing for you.
Absolutely. And I think now that I know who I am more, I think the universe has a funny way of making things work, even if you don't ever think it's going to happen to you. Because I think, yes, I'm very happy to be a business owner. I like all the challenges that it brings. I like the fact that, you've got to think of 50 things all at once and be a good practitioner all at the same time. But yeah, I would never have done it by myself.
Yeah, but also it's good to have, I think it was good. Well, I think it's good. People could disagree with me, but I think it's good to have the safety net cut out from under you.
Yes, for sure.
It just forces you to go to the level of your training.
Absolutely.
People always say that, that good people rise to the occasion. I don't think anyone rises to the occasion. I think people fall to their level of training.
Yeah.
And if your level of training is solid, then you fall to that, and that backs you up really well. And so, yeah, that's a really good example of what happened to you, where you kind of were an associate one day, and then bang, the next day you had to start something off.
Absolutely.
And osteopathy, I think, was there for you, right? Like,
Yes.
ultimately, you probably didn't know much about business. You
No.
probably didn't know much about setting things up and running a business, but you just got in there and you treated, and it worked, and you got more people, and then
Yeah.
you learnt the other stuff as you went along.
Yeah.
And so, like me, I thank osteopathy, and I guess you probably thank osteopathy too, because that's the ultimate
Sure.
thing that sustains us, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and
All right.
patients love it. Yeah. It's good.
Yeah. All right. So let me then go on to my next question.
Yes.
Let's talk about your journey into practice ownership, and I
Yes.
guess your early days in practice ownership.
Yes.
Tell us about that, like setting up, finding a location,
Yeah. It was
getting
all,
buying treatment tables,
of
and getting a
course,
reception desk, and all the mechanical things
all the
that you had to
bits.
go through.
Yes.
Um, what was that like for you?
Crazy. When you look back, absolutely crazy. And I look back, I'm like, oh my God, I was very young at the time.
Mm,
But I think, yeah, again, the universe has weird ways of doing things for you. Yeah, so we had to look, and it all had to be very quick because I already had a mortgage at this point.
mm,
So all of a sudden had a mortgage and then out of a job. Very early in my career which was not what was planned. Luckily, I had a lot of like support from family through that time because it was a really horrible, horrible time.
mm,
But yeah, me and Guyan, my business partner, both in the same boat, both put a little bit of money in, found a location. We sort of worked out that a lot of our patients were coming from like a new growth corridor, maybe a few suburbs over. So decided that was the right place. So we got into an old real estate
mm-hmm.
fit out. So there
Office,
happened
yeah.
to be a desk there. We just had to sort of fill in. They had a lot of glass walls, so we had to sort of fill in a few walls. Bought a couple tables, and then yeah, ready to go.
Mm,
I think the turnover time was about a month, which is crazy. I think the first few patients we said, please bring cash because
yeah.
we hadn't had a telephone working. There was no posters on the wall. There was nothing. But yeah, I don't know. And then you just sort of look back. You're like, I remember being so quiet, and a lot of my patients then, who knew the journey, they're like, oh, don't worry, it will come. And I remember the first day I had 10 patients in one day. And I was like, that was like a milestone for me. I'm like, I think this is going to be something. Like I'm seeing 10 patients in one day. And it did, and it kept growing. And I think it didn't take us long before we even needed to hire another associate, which was really good.
Yeah.
But we had very faithful patients that followed us and helped us along the way.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Great. And tell us, I mean, no website, no, none of that
No
stuff back then, right?
website. No,
Yeah.
no. So it was
S-
just social media. Social media
Yeah.
was the thing. So people found you
What
that
was
way.
what were your hours like? Like, would you kind of treat
Crazy.
and then just stay back and do all your paperwork
Yeah. I
and
think we were open 8 till 8 and we sort of just tried to make it work. I think we did
mm,
crazy hours like that for a very long time, to be honest. But there was nothing, we were young, we wanted to make it work, we wanted to be available to our patients. So you did it. So it was good. Yeah.
yeah,
And then it wasn't until, yeah, slowly we sort of started cutting back, trying to make it a bit more logical. But we still did some long hours, but
mm,
really enjoyed it. They're not long hours because it's not even for the money's sake. It's because, patient X has got a sore neck. She really wants you to
mm,
help her out. Can you please help her out? Because it's going to change the course of patient X day that day, do you know?
yeah, yeah.
So that's just what you do.
It is what you do.
Yeah.
Okay, so and tell us about your business partner,
Yes.
or a business partner. So
Yes.
the experience with that.
Yes.
Obviously, you guys are still business partners,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yes.
that's good.
Yes. Yeah. So he was a fellow RMIT person. We
Yeah.
studied together. He sort of he took a gap year. So he sort of fell into my year. So I only got to meet him fourth year. But
Mm,
back then there was no Western Suburbs osteo students at all. And he happened to be a Western Suburb osteo student. So we did a lot of
hmm.
study together and I coerced him into getting the same job as I did the first time. So it sort of just made sense. We work very well together, Guyan and I, which is
Okay.
good. So yes,
And
like
do
my
you think
second husband.
it's a bit of the work husband?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a bit of serendipity there in terms of you both kind of being out of a
Yes.
job on the same day.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
do you think that was the catalyst that kind of
For
kept
sure. I think
kept you
even for him,
together?
For sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah.
Because I mean, you could easily see how if that didn't happen, you could have maybe started your own thing 6 months down the track, and
For
him started
sure.
his own thing, and
Absolutely.
so yeah, it's weird how the universe works in that way.
Absolutely, yes. And we'd
Um,
both worked together for a couple of years, so we sort of had a bit, I think it'd
right.
be random now to like get into business with somebody I haven't worked
Yeah.
with for 2 years. So it's sort of we knew it could work and it works.
Okay.
So it's good.
And
Yes.
did you ever sit down and go, okay, we're business partners. This is
Yes.
how we're going to make it work. Tell us, did you
Yes.
have that conversation?
Yeah, I think for the first
Yeah.
little bit we sort of just worked as contractors almost, to the business. I think that's what we did. So
Right.
we
But
sort of
in terms of running the business, like making
yes,
decisions on direction and kind of like, what are we going to do for marketing? What are we going to do? How are we going to do this?
constantly evolving still.
Yeah.
I
So
think
is
it's only
there,
really been the last few years that we've actually started to really define roles so that we're not wasting time and working more
yeah.
efficiently. Yeah.
Well,
So
because I mean, to take it to another level, there could be some serious, I guess, conflict there
for
when
sure.
roles aren't defined very well and people are
Yes.
stepping on each other's toes. And
Yes.
so, have you guys worked that out? Because I mean, it's been since 2013,
13. Yes.
and
For a long time.
it's 2025.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
12 years is long for some marriages, and you
Absolutely.
guys have
And we're still
stayed
good
together in
friends.
business.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're still good friends.
Yes.
And so there was never a sit down and saying, look, Carolina, you look after the mentoring of the associates. I'm going to look after the marketing. You look after X. I'll look after Y.
I honestly
We,
think that that nugget was only really delivered to us in the last couple of years, and it mainly from an efficiency point of view.
yeah.
To sort of go, okay, rather than sort of triple handling said problem, let's
Mm,
let go and take care of the marketing. So he sort of does more, he's like our sort of CFO. So he does a lot of the bookwork, a lot of the marketing, payroll, those sorts of things. I'm probably more like operations, a lot of mentor, clinical support sort of work. But
hmm.
we blend, and I think we're weird like that we do work well blending roles. And
Okay.
we, both of us step in when the other one can't. So it's been a real blessing having a business partner.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's probably not most people's experience. So that's why I
Yes.
really wanted to dive into that with you
Yes.
to see if there was some secret potion that you had. But that doesn't
I
look
think
like
we're
that.
just yin and yang. I think like a good marriage, I think
Yeah.
we both have qualities. There's some things, I'm sure that he would change about me and I would change about him. But
Yeah.
I think we do work very well, and I think
Yeah.
his strengths are my weaknesses and his weaknesses are my strengths. So,
Well,
and
good.
again, who would have thought at 24 we would have known this stuff? But it sort of just worked out. We're
Yeah.
very lucky.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Okay. And so tell us how your practice in terms of the last probably 5 years post
Yes.
COVID
Yes.
or mid COVID to post COVID.
Yes.
Tell us how your practice has evolved. Like what's changed in the way that you do things in the last few years that I think that you think has set you
A
up maybe
lot.
for the next 5 years really
Yes.
well.
Well, yeah, probably a big thing with that is also Guy and I both have little children now.
Hmm.
So we're sort of definitely feeling the struggle. I think that's a question that you have for me later. But so we're sort of trying to make things easier for ourselves in a lot of ways. Yeah, COVID was a wrecking ball for lots of things and really changed the way a lot of things a lot, changed the way a lot of people think about work and all those sorts of things. So
Mm,
I don't think there's been any like huge significant changes. I think we've probably just gone a little bit more about prioritizing our staff and keeping our circles small,
hmm.
just because I feel like, yeah, then it means there's more energy for your staff. They're more connected to the principal. I think that just works. So that's probably been a big shift over the last few years.
Yep.
Trying to think what else. I don't know. COVID, it's just been such a whirlwind. Hey, there's been a cost of living struggle, which I've never really faced before. I've never really felt people genuinely needing appointments, but genuinely, truthfully not being able to afford appointments. And I'm
Hmm.
feeling that's been a real challenge for us all to face. Um, and it's sort of, I don't know, we've had to sort of diversify a little bit too, to be like, okay, how can we get the most out of this? How can we set this patient up with an EPC?
Mm,
It's really changed the course of our delivery of how we do things, which, is sad really.
yep.
Particularly, yeah, in the West when there's a lot of bulk billing clinics where we live. So there's very minimal patient contact with a GP. So I do think in a lot of ways, an osteopath is a really handy contact to have, like a bridge for the healthcare network that can sort of advocate and sort of guide and things. And I think it's quite sad that even osteo is sort of at that unaffordable mark. So people are really losing opportunities for health, which,
Yeah.
yeah, is not fair.
Okay. Why do you think there's been such a, um, I guess, a post-COVID, lag, so
Yes.
to speak? What do you think? I mean, COVID obviously was a different experience in Melbourne as it was in New South Wales.
Yes.
We probably did the best business we've ever done in New South Wales through COVID
Well,
because we
it's
were
funny because when
open
you
and
look back at the
essential.
books, my accountant would say it all looks great, but we were supported with grants and things along the way. But
Mm.
it was very, very stressful. Um,
Hello, everyone. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank everyone for watching and listening to the podcast. If you have received value from this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel on whichever platform that you are listening on. If any of the conversations have resonated with you and you feel that I can help elevate your practice, you can find me at successinpractice.net. That is, the Success in Practice program can be found at successinpractice.net. The Success in Practice program is the signature program that takes a practitioner who may be struggling with retaining patients. They may not be certain about building effective treatment strategies, and they may feel somewhat anxious and doubtful about what they are going to do with a patient. And they are not really accelerating in the real world of private practice. It takes this practitioner and it turns their careers right around to the point where the patients have an effective diagnosis and a real treatment plan that they can take home. Patients are happy to book in multiple sessions with you and they are confident about your abilities. And more importantly, you now have direction and are confident about your own abilities. The program streamlines how you operate as a practitioner. Guys, you should have been taught this at university, but you weren't. You may have been practicing for the last few years thinking there has to be a better way. There has to be a more effective way of engaging with patients and getting them results. Well, there is. And this is what the program delivers. Go to successinpractice.net and check out the options available to you. See where I can help you easily grow your patient list and finally earn the rewarding income that you deserve. For all the information on how you can reach me personally, check out the show notes. Also in the show notes, you'll find a link to the chat transcripts from these podcasts. These are valuable and a wealth of information. I really hope that you're enjoying the podcast. Guys, leave a comment if there's any questions on this episode. And please, don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Now, back to the show.
yeah, very, very stressful. And I don't know, now it's all said and done. You look back, oh, it was okay. It was sort of, actually probably were profitable years and that's great. But they were very, very hard, it's
Mm.
very hard. We've never really been trained to be the leaders that we had to be at that time.
What
You'd get
what
a
was what
delivery.
was hard about it? I'm not saying that it wasn't hard, but I
No,
genuinely want to know
yes.
what was the difficult part of COVID in terms of were you unable to operate? Were you
We definitely did. I think we initially, when it first started, we decided to close our clinic willingly. I think it was a
right?
bit like patients were dropping off. We were a bit scared ourselves. This was the sort of like the very start, this would have been sort
Mm.
of, I think it was like April maybe.
Mm-hmm.
For a month we closed. And that's like, we still had rent payable, everything was still payable. There was no word of any government support at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, holy crap, what are we doing here? Then the big struggle was also getting team back into the clinic. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of team were very scared to be so close to another patient at that time. So you're like trying to make ends meet, you're trying to pay rent, but you're also, having conversations with your staff about it's okay to come to work. It's,
Mm.
and you're trying to keep them as safe as possible. I think one of our first, when we came back from one of the lockdowns, we came up with this decisive, like we only had one patient in the clinic at one time. So we had to create this algorithm that you could only have, like every osteo only had like one patient every sort of 3 hours to allow that only one patient came in. That like it was crazy what we came up with just to make a lot of the time the practitioners feel safe about coming to work.
So yeah, was the decision to voluntarily close, was that something done from a business point of view? Was it just not enough patients to sustain the business,
I think
or
it was a bit of everything. It just felt
was
like
it
the books were
a
coming down at that time. Yeah. And
yeah,
it was just sort of safer, easier. I don't think we'd planned for it to be a month, but it was a month.
right?
Yeah. And that was like without a lockdown. I think that was just what was going on in the press at the moment. I don't think we were the only clinic to do that at that time. So that's just what we felt like we needed to do. But it was terrifying
Yeah.
to try to create telehealth and all sorts of crazy
Yeah.
times.
Okay. So the next question I have on that
Yes,
is, I mean, you're out in the western suburbs of Melbourne.
yes,
You're within. I'm assuming you're within also a Polish community and probably a multi-ethnic
yes,
kind of
yep,
area of Melbourne,
yes, yep,
and that mirrors my particular clinic situation where I
yep,
am. What I found was that those local community, especially in the Western, that were highly immigrant, highly
yes,
multicultural,
yep,
they weren't as, I guess, afraid of
yes.
COVID
I
as
think this
say
is where
some of
we
the
had
inner
all
city.
sorts. Yeah, we had
Yeah.
all of the personalities. We had the
So
people that were so angry that we closed due to the lockdowns, but also
yeah.
people that were like, "Oh, thank God I wouldn't have come in anyway." So it was
Mm,
very hard to sort of meet people, and it was really hard because for some people, like the vaccine mandate was so hard, and you're having
mm,
these real ethical conversations, and in your head you're like, I'm just trying to do the right thing. I just don't want my business to shut down tomorrow because I've got a $10,000 fine that I was not
mm,
expecting, and yet
yeah.
people, tore you down for it.
Yeah.
We had one patient send us a nasty email about our mask, like, because we sort of forced
Hmm.
people at the time, and I think at that time we were wearing face shields and glasses and all sorts.
Mm,
And I think we sort of were asking patients to wear masks at that time. And yeah,
mm,
this horrible email threatening legal action, my human rights, all those sorts of things. It's really horrible because you're just like, I'm just trying to do the right thing here,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was really, really tricky. So, and I think just having those battles constantly from all ends as a business owner, as we all did, for 2 years straight,
Hmm.
all the while not knowing if you're going to make rent, all the while not
Mm,
knowing if you're going to keep your staff, all the while, not knowing if you're going to catch COVID from the next patient. I'm going to be home for the next 2 weeks.
yeah.
All that sort of horrible stuff.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
layering all those, ret tests, whatever, those,
for
the
sure.
all that
Yes,
stuff, all the
yes.
testing for COVID, all
Oh, we had
the.
like we had to write like letters for everyone to say that they were employee. We had to set out their letters so that
Mm,
if the police caught them on their way to work, you could actually justify. I remember that
yeah,
was a big deal because if I didn't have it right to the minute, some of the staff were super stressed that I didn't have it to the minute. So it's really hard.
yeah, and
So
you had to get COVID tested, I think every week or 2 weeks to make sure that
yeah, yes,
you had to
yeah,
get all that stuff done. So I understand all that.
yes.
It's just I think yeah,
But then when we were open, it was very busy, and it
yeah,
was sort of it made up for the downtime. And now that you look back, you wouldn't want to live it again. But I think when
mm,
we opened, you would fill every single slot because people, we were, especially in Melbourne, we were probably one of the first services that you could actually. There was a lot
mm,
of lockdowns that you couldn't see your hairdresser, but you could see your osteopath. And
yeah,
people just were craving human connection. They
yeah,
would come
yeah.
in, for any. So it was actually a really, really crazy, busy time.
Mm.
Um, so
I saw some funny injuries at that time. I think that was a really funny time for injuries.
I broke my sesamoid in my foot at that time because I was
Mm.
doing F45 from my TV with no
Yeah,
shoes on, like a
yeah,
silly osteo that
yeah,
should know better.
yeah.
And I smashed up my foot.
I was just seeing plantar fasciitis and knee
Yes,
pain all day long and people
yes,
would come in and say, what's going on with your feet?" And they'd
yes,
go, "Oh, I just started walking." I'm like,
yes.
how are you walking for?" And they go, "Oh, I went out a 3 hour walk with my wife."
We did the
And I'm
same.
like,
Yeah, yes,
you've never walked 5 minutes in your life. All of a
yeah,
sudden you're walking for like progress. Hello. So you're seeing all these injuries from people just having too much time, too much,
absolutely.
not, and that was funny, but it was a very busy time. I guess the last question on that I want to ask you is that given hindsight, would you do
Yes,
things any differently?
yes, I think so.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, but you say hindsight.
Well,
My
given
husband,
hindsight, because
my
you don't know
husband
at the
is a
time.
nurse too, so
Yeah.
I think in my head I probably had that in my ear. What he was dealing with at work was
Mm,
10 times over what I was dealing with, and the
mm,
messaging, and the advocating for, the vaccine and the lockdowns and stuff was quite loud.
mm,
Melbourne was like that too. We were watching, I remember like when Dan Andrews would come out with an announcement, the whole clinic would stop. Patients, every osteo would come in, crowd around the computer to find out how many weeks we were locked in for us.
yeah,
It was a
right.
crazy time. Um, But I think all of us would look back and be like, a lot of those rules we probably could have, like you wouldn't have closed down for a month
Mm.
based on your own opinion, right? Stupid, especially if we knew that we actually had forced lockdowns coming for us.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, so, but you do the best that you know at the time. Never felt
Yeah.
anything like it. I'm
Well,
watching The
that.
Last of Us at the moment. It's about like zombies. And you look back at that, you're like, we lived that. We
Yeah.
really did. Yeah.
Yeah. It felt like we were the zombies sometimes, I
Yeah,
think.
for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's why I asked the question in that fashion in hindsight, because, given that nobody
And I
kind of
think we all
understood.
did. You could tell the first couple of lockdowns, we were all very by the book. By the end, you sort of had to, you had
Yeah.
to really.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that you weren't doing anything illegal by any sense, but um,
No, people
yes,
had enough of it. I think
for
people had enough
sure.
of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
All right. All right. Well, I mean, given that particular time and that particular period, I
Yes,
guess that would have been a a growth time. That should have been a growth
it
time
was
in your
definitely.
practice, and
Yes,
probably a real accelerative growth time.
definitely.
And COVID, although given what you said about your accountant saying that, but the books look good, there was
Yes,
obviously some challenges there.
for sure.
I want to ask you about, I guess, some of the current challenges that you're having in terms of
Yes,
running a business and managing people and
yes.
managing associates and things of that nature.
Yeah.
What are you finding your biggest challenges at the moment?
Um, yeah, definitely post-COVID, we've never struggled with retention like we have lately.
Mm,
We're sort of, yeah, I think, yeah, I'm not, there's lots of reasons for that we can get into or not get into. Um, but I think that's where we started to really hone in on a smaller team. I think at one point there was maybe after COVID, the work was so busy but there was just no associates around. And I
mm,
remember making the joke, like, if you've got a pulse and got a degree, you got a job with me. Like,
yeah,
I'm all
yeah,
for it. Whereas then, and it was just when you sort of started to manage to hire people that the cost of living crisis came through and really people started to hold back. And I think that and other reasons, we've just sort of managed, like, osteos, I think, are struggling to really enjoy the work.
mm,
Um, which I find really, because I'm such a passionate osteo and I find it really hard to get my head around. But I do think from what I hear, it's a lot of the stuff that's going on at uni and the talk. I also think because osteopathy, there's so much more opportunity for a young osteopath than there was when I started. I think people are looking in other places. And it's been, yeah, sometimes hard to compete with.
right. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's go into that a little bit.
Yeah.
You said that osteopaths, you're finding the new grads aren't enjoying it as much as well, obviously, as much as you enjoy it,
Yes.
it's very obvious to see how much you have a passion for it.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? I mean, you've mentored some osteopaths, you've
Yes.
seen graduates come through,
Yes.
and I know that this is purely an opinion, and I'm going to ask your
Yes.
opinion because that's why you're on the show. I'm
Yes.
interested in what you have to say.
Yes. I
Why do
also
you?
don't think it's exclusive to osteo, what's happened to osteo, if that makes sense. Like I
Right.
think
Well, we'll
if,
break that
yes,
down for me. What is it that is exclusive to osteo, and what is it that's not exclusive to osteo?
I
So,
think
what are the parts of? Sorry, but I want
yes.
to
No,
just
no,
get
no,
this right.
please.
What are the parts? I think what are the parts that you think the profession is not doing well in terms of
Yes.
osteopathy, and
Yes.
giving that to a graduate? And then
Yes.
what are the parts in terms of larger society and generational things that you think are
Yes.
impacting
Yes.
what's going
And this
on?
is very much my very limited opinion.
Yeah,
Humble Carolina from the Western suburbs.
that's fine.
But I do think and this came up I went to the last town hall meeting a little while ago, and I think the big thing for
Mm,
me is I don't think there's enough people being loud and proud about how much they're enjoying their job as an osteopath. I think
yeah.
it seems like, from my opinion, a lot of, the new grads are coming out with very um, predetermined ideas of what an osteopath is. Like the fact that they've got a university subject about burnout blows my
Mm,
mind. You're delivering to them you're going to fail in this job.
right.
I just don't understand it. Um,
I agree with you, but I'm gonna
yes,
stop you there because
yes,
I just want to ask you another a point or a question on a point that you said.
yes,
You said that that osteopaths aren't loud and proud about how much they're enjoying their job,
yes,
and then in the next sentence you said that new graduates have a preconceived idea of what osteopathy is when they come
Yes.
out.
Yes.
Somebody is obviously being loud and proud because people have a preconceived idea about what's going on.
Yes.
What's going on there? How do you reconcile those two things? Like who's screaming the loudest and who should be screaming the loudest?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. And this is where I think, like, avenues like your podcast, I think it's really good. Particularly, I think we do have to almost differentiate what a private practice osteopath is to all the other flavors too. And maybe then go, a private practice osteo is an osteo that feels very fulfilled in her job, that, is able to, have children and, earn a good income. And I think there's not enough of that. Like sometimes I read on LinkedIn, don't remember who it was, but recently they were like, oh, private practice, it's a low paying job, but I do it because I love it. I'm like, that's just not the right messaging that we should be sending out about this job, and it's what you make it. If you work hard, like any job, if you work hard, you will see the financial reward for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference. And I think that's probably maybe what we're not selling, I think. Yes. But
Right.
anyway, that's my very limited opinion.
Okay. And okay, what is it that you think though is more of some of the reasons that don't have to do with osteopathy? Like you said that there's some things that
Yeah,
you said,
so
yeah.
the last couple of staff members we've had move on have very much been about work-life balance. They don't want to work Saturdays. They don't want to work after hours, which I find it like, I don't know, I find it really hard because I'm like, you're in like a service profession, you want to, you understand that you need to be accessible for people. So I find that hard. Even like we've had people, ask for work from home as new grads, and I find that really hard in a private practice clinic where there's not really that sort of job position. We do have employees at my work as well, so I think that's probably where those conversations come in more. And I don't think that was something I strived for, it wasn't even on the menu for me. I think that's the big difference. Whereas now it is where the profession has changed. Occupational rehab is a job people can do from home with lots of flexibility. And I think it's been hard to compete with.
Right.
And
yes. Yeah. Okay.
I also think with that, it's, the graduates these days, like they have been, studying on the computers a lot of this is my very limited opinion, but they have been in front of the computer, studying from home a lot of the time. So I think it has been quite a big transition in my head to suddenly have a full-time job that you're sort of, in an office 40 hours a week. So maybe that is, it's a really big leap for somebody that's really had online study the whole time. And different from my experience where I had to, I did the hours at uni, and when I got a job, I just changed those hours from uni hours to work hours, and it didn't feel like that big of a shift for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Tell me about, I guess you mentioned that, and you seem quite passionate about having this subject taught about burnout at university.
Yes.
And I think from what I understood, you think we're preparing people to burn out by teaching them that.
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't think we're not talking about how are you going to handle all your millions of dollars. Like we're talking about burnout, right? Like we're not.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's just sending the wrong messages out because I feel like when I hire new grads, I definitely hire and they seem hesitant before they've even started, which I think has been a real shift post-COVID. That's my opinion, because they're worried about their hands. They're worried that it's not going to be a career for, 5 years plus, which, and that's why I keep trying to tell them, like, I've been out 14 years. I still love my job. I still, can pull, if it wasn't for my toddlers, I'd pull full-time hours, like, and you're still physically capable. Whereas I don't think that messaging is being delivered to the students. And I think they're already looking for greener pastures before they've even started. Not greener pastures, but other things, because they just don't believe that it's a long-term bet for them.
Yeah. You're right about that. I think the phenomenon of burnout is something that we keep harping on it, but I think we've done it to ourselves as osteopaths. We talk about work-life balance as if it's something that has to be predetermined. You work 3 days a week, you have 3 days a week off, or you only work half days, or you do 4 hours and then you go for a surf, and or you got to make sure you do some yoga on the beach and make sure it's not like, well, look,
and you're also earning $100,000 on that sort of lifestyle as well.
Yeah, that's not feasible. If you want to work 3 days a week, be ready to earn $30,000 a year.
Absolutely.
If you want to, if you want the big If you want bigger dollars, you got to work bigger hours.
Yes.
That's not different than any other industry that you go into.
Yes.
You know, and there's no such thing as work-life balance.
Yes.
It's actually an illusion,
Yes.
right? Work-life balance is an illusion because if you're happy working 80 hours a week, right?
Yes.
Then work 80 hours a week.
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
people that are
That's what I
happy,
think. I just
yeah,
think if
people
you
that are
find the right
happy,
job, and osteopathy can be that job.
yeah,
That if if you're busy helping people, improving people's quality of life, that is work-life balance. Like I come to
that's
work
it.
happy, I leave work happy, I've contributed to the greater
Yeah,
society. It's wonderful.
yeah. And being tired is something,
Yes.
and that's fine to be tired. People get
Yes.
tired, but it's not like burnout, as in like proper physical burnout, like, metabolic syndrome, I guess you can call it that. It's a proper thing. Like
Yeah.
everything's down. Your hormonal levels change. Your sleep pattern goes off. You can't sleep at night. You get
Yeah.
insomnia. You're constantly fatigued. It's something that takes like months and months to develop.
Yeah.
And it's not something that should be just kind of labeled lightly, because
Yes.
I think there are people out there that do get it. And when we say that everyone can get it, we're kind of cheapening it. So
It's
yeah,
also like, if you've got the right supports around you, if you've got a good team, if you hopefully have a principal that teaches you through,
mm,
what it is to look after yourself and be a busy practitioner. Like there's nothing wrong with being a busy practitioner. And I think that's what I find is the battle. Because I think, even the notion of 50 patients a week is sort of almost frowned upon, I think, because it's like, oh, it must be too much. It's like, I don't know, if it's what you enjoy, and if you're doing everything sensibly and like it doesn't have to be, and it can really be a really good job.
it's a fantastic job from
Yeah.
someone that does, 100 to 150 consultations a week. I can tell you that without practicing osteopathy, I couldn't do that.
Yes, of
Right.
course.
And that's the key. That's the key for people that don't want to burn out, is you need to practice osteopathy,
Yes.
right? If you're constantly chasing your tail in the treatment room, wondering and being anxious about what you're doing, you're going to get burnt out with 10 patients a week,
For sure. For sure.
right?
Definitely.
So if people want to know the magic potion, I guess, to not being burnt out,
Yes.
if you're an osteopath, practice osteopathy,
Yes.
you
For sure. Yeah.
and you'll be
Something that you
fine.
love to do and find the passion in it, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Like osteopathy in itself, and the philosophy and the thought process of being an
Yeah.
osteopath, there's a beauty there. There's a comfort there that
Yes.
that somebody's going to improve.
For sure.
Like that before you go into the treatment room. So
Absolutely. Yes.
everything's relaxed. You just do
Yes.
things relaxed, and you walk out relaxed, and you go, okay, right. Now it works a lot of the times.
Yes.
Most of the time it works, and when it doesn't work, it's not osteopathy's fault. It's
Yeah.
generally our fault as
Yeah.
practitioners.
Yeah.
And then you go and assess what you did, and you learn from it. You grow and you get better. But that shouldn't create burnout. Like that's not a burnout process.
Yeah.
The burnout process is when you start to split the body into different parts, into different bits, and talk about silly things like weak glutes and core
Yes.
strength and individualize the body and not look at it systemically and from a structure and function point of view. And
I think that's maybe part of it too, that you could sort of get into that. I think like the way that, and I understand the reasons why allied health is becoming what it is, but I think also there's a lot of pressure for us to have so many hats on. And I think it's sort of really nice to pick your lane and stick to it and do it really, really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Especially in the young years,
yeah, for sure. Like, I don't
you
know,
know.
I took one of my patients on Monday to see an exercise physiologist just because I wanted her to see him, and I knew if I didn't come along, it wouldn't happen. And the stuff that he did taught, I'd never seen or been taught in my life. And it was actually really refreshing, because I'm like, this is why there are different breeds of us allied health professionals. There are some things I've not even thought about, and I've been an osteo for 14 years. And why should I? I am an osteopath. I've
That's
thought of
right.
somatic dysfunction. I've thought of all these other things, and this is what I do well. And where I need help, I will seek it, because, we live in Australia where there is all these amazing allied health professionals
Yeah.
that can really help in lots of different ways that I can't always help in.
Yeah, definitely. No, especially in those young years, kind of staying in your lane and making sure that you get that right. You can
Yes.
kind of you can grow out of your lane as you
Yes.
get more
Sure.
experience.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with that, but definitely kind of learning the basics, getting the basics right, getting that done right,
Yes.
being good at what you do in that lane,
Yeah.
sets you up for success and confidence,
Yes.
and that ultimately will allow you to grow in a better way.
Yeah.
I see it. I see it. You see it on the Facebook groups where somebody who's like, that they're a 3 year out or 2 year out practitioner, and they're like, I have a patient with a TMJ dysfunction that's getting tinnitus with a previous Hep B infection.
Yes.
What do I do? I'm like, what are you doing?
Refer. Yeah.
Like, what do
And
you, what do you,
I think that's where, and I
you
think
know?
that's even like my uni degree. And I think a lot of them, like we are being taught a lot, but I think it's also very refreshing. I think this is where, like, Lisa Barker, for example, that I mentioned, like I think it sort of was those few teachers that taught you that it's okay
Yeah,
to not have all the answers and it's
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
like, and we do, like, we've got so many other professionals that can help us along the way. And when in doubt, refer, and there's nothing wrong with that,
No, there's
that
nothing wrong
means
at
you've done
all.
the right thing by your patient.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, so we've had the discussion about some of the challenges in your business and
Yes.
kind of managing people.
Yes.
I want to talk about you as a practitioner and what you're
Yes.
doing.
Yes.
You're a generalist,
Yes.
self-described generalist. You're a
Yes.
structural practitioner.
Yes.
Tell us where you find the beauty in that. Like, what's the attraction for that? Like, sell it to a young osteopath
Of course.
about being a generalist, about having that structural approach.
Yes. I think I know a lot about a lot. I don't know. And I think that's pretty cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also know my limitations. And I think being, the years out in practice, you do sort of learn if something sounds unusual, it's probably because it is. And I think it's, you get that confidence that you sort of don't have to have all the answers because I've seen a lot. And if it sounds unusual, it is, and it means I need more help.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, yeah, being a generalist, like I don't really get bored. I don't really get boxed in because I think, especially in osteopathy, I think this is probably, but I think you need to be a generalist to be an osteopath, right? To
Yeah.
sort of be like, okay, you have a neck strain, but where is it coming from? Why? And that's where we sort of look at pelvis and do all the crazy things that we do. And I think if we didn't have a really great understanding of the whole body for the system that it is, I don't think you could truly be a generalist.
Yeah.
And that involves being really good at everything, to really being able to identify all the little bits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is it in the structural approach that really attracts you? I mean, why aren't you somebody that's gone off and done biodynamics and cranial and what is it about the structural approach that really keeps you engaged as an osteopath?
I think it just makes, not that and to be honest, the cranial and biodynamics almost scares me a little bit because I know it's got power that I can't really put my finger on. Maybe it's my science brain. And I, never say never. Who knows where the career will go and things like
Right.
that. But I've also found, I don't know, the structural approach is appreciated by patients. It's tried and true. It works. What else would I say about that? I don't know. I just really enjoy it. I think if you know it works and it's tried and true, you love it, right?
Why
You
does
see
it
a
work?
problem in front of you and you just go, okay, yeah, let's make it work. It's going to work.
So why do you think it works? I mean, why do you think, have you thought about it? Have you kind of sat there and thought about why you think that the way that you approach treatment works?
I don't know. I think it is my generalist nature, and I do think rather than sort of addressing patient X says my neck is sore, I don't think I've ever been the sort of practitioner to just stop it there. Do you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why it works because I think we sort of get to the deeper problems.
Yep.
I also think as a generalist, I do like to think of myself as a bit of a network hub that you sort of go, okay, I'm a generalist, I'm going to help you with said problem, but I can see that, like my patient that I took to the EP, like I can see that there's, a strength element here that I
Mm-hmm.
am limited to, be able to help with. So I think as an osteopath, a good osteopath, or like we all are, we create the bridges. So we're sort of a generalist, almost like a GP would be a generalist, that we are sort of that middle ground. We know a little bit about a little bit, oh, sorry, a lot about a lot, and we sort of can stretch or find the person that they need when they need it as well. And I think
Yeah.
if we didn't have a generalist approach and a generalist appreciation for other people and the network that we're involved in, I don't think we would be able to do that so well.
Yeah. And do you see the body? I mean, there's the word biopsychosocial is very
Yes.
nouveau.
Yes.
and it's the in thing at the moment.
Yes.
And I had this conversation with another osteopath on a couple of episodes. I think it might have been Phil Austin, how, body, mind, and spirit is biopsychosocial. Like, if that's
Yes.
not as the obvious
Yes.
connection there, I don't know what is.
Yes.
Um, and I guess looking at the body in a biopsychosocial aspect,
Yes.
we've almost, I think, neglected the biomechanical aspect of it too,
Yes.
because we're really heavy into the psychosocial at the moment. We're
Yeah.
really looking at the brain and social connections and perception
Yeah.
and placebo and talking about all these things and we've forgotten that the body is still a part of the physical universe that
For
acts
sure.
under pressure from mechanical forces. And when you walk, there's reactive forces going through your body. There's action, and there's torque, and there's levers, and all these things that happen everywhere else in the universe. I mean,
But I also think in the same light, how unique is osteopathy that we actually get to really tap into the psychosocial stuff as well? Do you know, like how often are
yeah,
you massaging somebody's traps out and they're like, oh yeah, I just twitch my leg, nah, nah, nah. And then before you know it, you find out about the divorce, the blah, 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 blah,
yes,
blah, blah, blah. And you're like, there's
definitely.
no way if I was a GP and if you came in saying I have neck pain, we would have been able to sort of break those barriers down. And it's not
Oh,
until we had the 28 minutes of consult that we actually found out the true cause of, all the stuff that's underwriting it. And that's why
yeah.
osteopathy is so great, I
It's
think.
great. It's
Yeah.
unique, and
Yes,
like I said, the neuro-emotional aspect of what
for
you just
sure.
discussed there is there, and we get an opportunity to do that. But in amongst that, what I want to make the point is that we almost forget about the. It's like when a mechanic works on a car or a
Yes.
panel beater or anybody that's working on anything mechanical, we understand that there are forces acting on that structure.
Yes.
That's just part of its laws of the universe.
Yes.
And sometimes we forget that the human body falls under the same laws of the universe. Like
Yeah.
if you have a problem in your talocrural joint,
Yeah.
that's eventually going to add extra stress on that lateral hamstring
Yes.
in a certain way that you've identified.
Yeah.
That is a mechanical pattern that you've been able to identify, and that's not an arbitrary thing that you've just plucked out of the sky.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, it's something that's going on because we've already proven that the laws of nature kind of exist, and that
Yeah.
physics, it works in a certain way. It's not like we need to bring evidence out to show that each time. And so we're almost, I think, neglecting the structural component of what's going on
Yeah.
in a particular injury
Yeah.
or a particular pain presentation. And I think we're doing that to our detriment. And it's great to add on to the stuff that you discussed about the neuroemotional stuff, and
Yeah.
having that conversation with patients about some of the stresses in their life, and that comes into the mind and the spirit aspect of it. But we don't want to forget about the body aspect of the
For sure.
anatomy,
Definitely.
physiology, which was delivered to us so brilliantly. I think that's why those RMIT graduates were so impressive, because their anatomy was so good, their physiology was so good. They just kind of had this recall effect, and it was very impressive. And I think they could handle a lot of things that we're almost neglecting these days in terms of what we're presenting with education.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess, okay, moving on to the next question.
Yes.
Do you have any, I guess, insights into what you think could be done better in terms of osteopathic education? Like, what are you seeing in terms of associates coming out? Where can we help them? Like, where do you think we can help them as a profession? What can we either say to university institutions or
Yeah.
do ourselves
Yeah.
that would maybe fill in the gaps for them?
I do think the intern program would be a really good thing to keep going. I think, and I just think that at the moment they keep coming up with different hoops and handles, and they've just almost made it a little bit too difficult, for the students to engage in and all that sort of stuff. But I think that's the best way. Like, any course that's really good has hands-on experience. Nurses
Yep.
do, clinical placement. My sister did a marketing degree and she worked in like a corporate setting for a year, and that was part of
Mm,
her degree. And I think that's really critical. You can only learn so much in a classroom or on a webinar in most of the case. So I think that would be really, really important. I also think, there's so many very passionate business owners that are more than willing to open their doors to
mm.
younger osteos to show them, the really positive stories. So it's a real shame that a lot of the time those doors aren't even being opened at all.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that would be the first thing. Yeah,
Yeah. So you
real
think a
real
lot
world
of
experience.
regulatory, I guess, things being moved away that would
For
help.
sure, because we've had lots of different things. We've had interns for many, many years. And there's been lots of things like sometimes I think that one point there was that you couldn't have an employee. So, if we had a receptionist that we'd known for years, but because she was employed with us, she suddenly couldn't get an internship. I just think
Mm.
that's silly. Like you've built a relationship with a clinic and then
Yep.
all of a
Yep.
sudden you're telling them to go somewhere else. I don't think it's very constructive. Um, what was the other thing? So I think a lot of the universities aren't offering it at all now. They're doing an aged care placement instead. And it just
Mm.
seems a bit silly because they're built then for aged care. So then they go and get a job with you or with me, and they haven't really never stepped foot in a clinic.
Yep.
I had a conversation with a new grad in my work, and he's it still hasn't like he did the 5 year degree and hasn't seen an osteo.
Mm.
It like blows my
Yeah.
mind a little bit, yeah, that's
That
even
is
a
mind blowing.
thing.
Yeah.
But I think that's also like a lack of opportunity. Like there should be some sort of mandated, like go to your local osteo clinic, write
Mm.
a report on, what the experience was. Write a report about how the clinic room was, and how patients like anything like that. That's real world
Mm.
experience that the osteo students really want, they need. And I think it would be really beneficial to sort of set up reasonable expectations of what the job is. So they're not getting
Yeah.
out 5 years in and going, oh, I didn't realize I'd be working Saturdays. Do you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to some of the early influences in your university
Yes.
time,
Yep.
some of those people that you mentioned,
Yep.
did you go and observe them practice whilst you were a student? Is that
I
something you
did
did?
towards, yeah, I did. I definitely did. So I saw, yeah, a few of the local osteos, and honestly, like,
Mm.
and this is the thing that I find, like, people were as I reckon it was third, fourth year. I
Mm.
definitely went to see Glenn Bales. I definitely went to Northwestern Osteopathic Clinic, uh, Rose. There was a few other clinics that were more than welcoming for
Mm.
me. I was the fly on the wall. I was surprised now I think sometimes patients even have a bit of objection, but back then they didn't. I was watching most consults,
Yeah.
and it was a really good experience of all the different styles. Like you see Glenn Bale's practice versus Rose in Northwestern, and you realise there are so many different flavours of osteo. Do you know?
Yep. Yep.
And it's really cool to see. I can get that real world experience, and then you go back to uni and you talk to your lecturers about, oh yeah, I saw this and I saw that. And it makes for some really good learning experiences. But I also,
Yeah.
again, did internship. I was seeing patients that were my own from, I was in fifth year doing that. And I think that also was wonderful because then you were seeing these patients, things were tricky. You had a clinician at your uni that you could then talk to them
Mm.
about and say, oh, I've got this patient in my internship. I really don't know. And, it was a wonderful experience for the whole classroom to learn, oh, yeah, Carolina had a tricky patient. Let's all learn from that experience.
Mm. Did you find that obviously having uh, experienced clinicians
Yes.
as people who are educators, did that
Yes.
make a difference to your outlook?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
And do you think that that's something that should be looked at from a university perspective? Like, should we be getting people with a bit more clinical experience? Like,
Absolutely. I definitely
should there
think
be a minimum? Should there be a minimum? You have to at least have practiced, I think, for I don't know, at least 10 years, I think,
yes.
before
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get to teach HVLA, or you get to teach something that's very, or, even the I think first year osteopathy, where a lot of the
Yeah.
principles and foundations get laid down,
Yeah.
that should be taught by somebody who's in the trenches doing the
Yes.
work at least 3 or 4 days a week,
For sure.
in clinic, and seeing the results from practicing osteopathy.
Yes. And I
You
do
know,
think a lot of the clinicians are,
yeah,
practicing osteos and stuff. But yeah, I
yeah,
do think they should be, the voice. And I think this is the tricky part of where our profession is going. And I totally get it and I understand. And I think it's wonderful that we're being welcomed into all these other avenues.
mm,
But I think in that we are neglecting private practice a little bit as well. This is my personal opinion.
mm,
For example, like I don't think a placement in an aged care facility is the same as as an internship at Live Well Health
no,
Centre in Caroline Springs. Do you know?
no, it's not.
And
No.
so, and I don't know, maybe we need to give the our students a little bit more of an opportunity to pick their trajectory. Okay, this interests me, let's do this. Or maybe like nurses, that they do clinical placement. Okay, we do aged care for a set amount of weeks, then we go into private practice, then we go into occupational rehab. And then at least we get a bit of a taster of everything. But we're not coming out having only experience in one arena and then expecting to be good in private practice.
Well, private practice should expose you to different populations.
Yes, for
And
sure.
that's the benefit of private practice, is diverse.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why I think you need to cut your teeth in private practice. And then if you like treating, if you like the geriatric space, go into aged care.
Yeah.
If you like the pediatric space, go there.
Yeah.
If you like whatever space you like, you can
Yes.
kind of go there and do that. But I think you get to see a diverse population in private practice, and I think that's where students and young practitioners need to cut their teeth.
Yes.
And I think universities should be looking at that as an avenue to making sure that we have a quality workforce.
For sure.
So yeah, well, okay. Let me then take you back to your own practice.
Yes.
What's the next 5 years look like for you? What do you want to achieve, and what do you hope to see in terms of growth and what you want to do? Are you happy just kind of going along at the same trajectory, or do you have kind of
yeah, I'm
plans?
not really sure. 5 years is a long time.
You said that at the moment you've got a young family,
Yes.
and your business partner is also has got that.
Yes.
Many of the osteopaths I've spoken to on the podcast credit a lot of their advancement in practice to
Yes.
their own life experience,
Yes.
and so are you seeing that happen? As your kids grow up, as they go through different things, are you?
So I think certainly having children, like I've always been interested in women's health and pregnancy, but I think having my own children and seeing the shortfalls of the health network and seeing, like, it blows my mind. Like, I'm educated, I read about all this stuff, and a lot of the things that I thought would never happen to me still happened, So I get a little bit passionate about that because I still think there's a lot of growth we can do in that area and advocating that we can do for women in that area. I know a lot of people have kids and then want to treat peds. I still have no interest, but this is just me being very.
Look, I want to ask
I know what I'm about.
I'm going to ask you a question, and people are going to probably hate on me for this.
Yes.
But do you think that being pregnant makes you
Yes.
better at treating pregnancy?
I think the buy-in with patients is definitely better. I don't think it makes
Yeah.
you better at treating pregnancy.
Right.
But I think
Like
also then you just.
experience, like for example, experiencing an ACL reconstruction,
Yes.
going through that process of surgery and then getting your ACL rehabilitated and your knee
Yes, I
rehabilitated.
get it. Yeah, absolutely. And
Does that-
any injury, after any injury I've had myself, I'm like, you become a master of that, right?
Yeah.
But I think every patient does as well. I had a
Yeah.
patient who, anyway, she had an MRI today. She's telling me I'm like, I swear you didn't know this 2 weeks ago. You've done some Googling, girl.
Yeah.
But I think that's really normal. I don't think so. I think it's more the pitfalls and the little bits, and this is like a whole other thing, but the
There's a
very
lot out
overly
there.
medically managed childbirth and those sorts of things, and patients' education into that space and sort of being advocates for themselves. Again, this is going on another trajectory, but like with both of my children, I was suggested that I have an induction, and I still disagree that I needed an induction, and that's a big thing, and then you deal with all the repercussions that come from their said induction, and I think that's a big, thing that an osteopath that has half an hour consult to talk to the pregnant woman about these scenarios and what can happen. And I don't think you get that when you're in a delivery room and the doctor says it's a C-section or nothing. Is it really nothing? Yeah. So I think that's maybe made me a little bit more passionate about maybe that sort of side of things. Certainly, yeah, feeling like the postpartum body and the changes that go on, that's been a very different, interesting experience.
Yeah, well, experiencing that, like, do you feel that's? I mean, if I had to lean one way, I would agree to say that, I think you're in a better position to understand, empathize. Empathy is a word that's used a lot.
For sure.
You're in a better position to empathize with the patient and kind of maybe know some of the things that they're about to. They're about to round a corner and they can't see what's around the corner.
Yes.
And you've been there.
Yes.
And so you can see a bit of that and can kind of guide them and make them feel
Yes.
less anxious about that.
Yeah.
And the reason why I asked is there's a lot out there in terms of pelvic pain
Yes.
and courses, extracurricular courses and
Yes.
pelvic pain and pregnancy
Yes.
and so forth. And I guess I always think, when I overlook at a course or something to do with, it's not just about pelvic pain, but even other courses, I always look at the person who's giving the course and saying,
Yes.
what real world life experience does this person have
Yes.
in the particular area that they're about to teach.
Yes.
So I think that's important.
Yeah, for sure.
No,
but I think I still think I've always had a passion for pregnancy. I've always had a passion for these sorts of things. And I
Yeah.
I don't cringe back at my life pre-kids and go, oh my God,
Right.
I can't believe I thought that or did that. I still think I did a pretty good job.
Good.
But I think it's that empathy and, those sorts of, that understanding.
You get a
And
deeper
maybe that
understanding.
appreciation too. I've had 2 pregnancies and they both
Yeah.
were very different and I had very
Yeah.
different experiences. So I think it's also maybe that exposure that, you read the textbooks and you do the courses and you understand what pregnancy is, but let's not force that on pregnant people. Just because you're
Yeah.
pregnant doesn't actually mean you're going to be in pain. A
Yeah.
lot of patients are terrified at 12 weeks that they're going to have a terrible pregnancy, they're going to be in a lot of pain, and a lot of them aren't at all. So I think it's also then sort of having this positive voice to be like, a female body is made to birth, right? And all
Yeah.
those sorts of conversations. I find that gets me pretty excited.
Yeah. Well, you're not disabled. You're not ill. You're
No,
pregnant.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We're meant to do it, and don't be
Yeah.
afraid of your body, be strong, so prepare for it like you would a marathon,
Yeah. Well, it seems like you understand the nuances, and I think that, like, you've been through it, so you know the
Yes.
nuances about the
Yes.
differences in.
Yes.
You've had
But I still have no interest in peds. I've done a couple of courses.
Yeah.
I really can't get around it. I don't know. So, but
Yeah.
doesn't mean
Yeah.
I still love my children. And I respect and I refer happily to peds osteopaths.
Yeah.
And this is where also, it's really good to know what your lane is. Like if we get the phone call, or I have patients that, I know the toddlers really well, and mum's like, oh, can you see little Johnny? I'm like, little Johnny can go to the other clinic that I know has wonderful pediatric osteos that I know are going to do a far better job than I do.
Yep.
Just because I'm female, just because I have children doesn't mean I have a license to treat, peds.
Karolina, when was the last time that you actually, when was the last time you did some kind of extracurricular or
I'm currently working
course?
through, I'm a bit of a course junkie.
Yep.
I'm doing, I love it and it's good. I really enjoy the networking.
So what are you doing at the moment, and what have you
I
done?
just did Jade Scott's advanced leadership course over the weekend. I got a sponsored spot, so I'm very grateful to get Jade, and I loved every minute. I think it's worth
Shout out to Jade.
every dollar. That's my second course, and I want to do the other one. So I'm a bit of a Jade cult follower right now, but they're very, very good, particularly for leadership, because we become business owners with zero experience. And then when things fall down, it's our fault ultimately. So it's really good to do this extra training that is tailored to allied health, to hopefully help you navigate the struggles.
Speak to me of that particular course that you're doing, or some of the course you've done with Jade.
Yes.
And I know that they're good courses, so I'm going to have a chat to you about them.
Yes.
How do you measure your return on investment? Like, let's say you pay. I'm going to put. I don't know what Jade's courses cost. I haven't had a look into it.
Yes.
Let's say you spend, I don't know, $4,000 on a course.
Yes.
Right. How do you particularly measure your return on investment?
If I have a really good weekend, I'm probably like, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know. It's a $1 million question, because a lot of, especially the advanced leadership stuff, it's like the first one I did last year was about persuasion and, persuasion and discussion. So it's about like and a lot of it was trying to find the win-win in discussions, Said employee wants a pay rise. I want to keep the business affordable. How can we find the win-win? And sort of negotiating. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Amazing skills that I've never really been taught, but we use it every day without knowing about it, right? So really, really good. And again, you don't really necessarily get return on investment, but I do think I've had a couple of discussions since that course, and maybe I do feel a bit more empowered since that.
We empowered is an interesting word. I think what happens is that you when you get better at having those conversations, right?
Yes.
They save you time and money.
Yes.
Because say you didn't have that conversation and the relationship went downhill.
Yes.
And you lost that employee, associate, whatever it is.
Yes.
And then you had to go and you had to find another one,
Yes.
and then you had to train them and mentor them. Well,
Absolutely.
you can measure that in time and
I
money
mean, my tears. Don't forget my tears.
and your tears.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's always tears.
Yeah. So you can measure that in time and money. And I
For
think
sure.
people need to look at that as a return on investment,
Very true. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and that's just I guess the tangible return on investment.
Yes.
But then you've got the intangible stuff like the reputation
Yes.
that you have within your
Yeah.
profession.
Yeah.
And then when that person who gets the win-win out of you
Yes.
is having a coffee with their osteo buddy that they studied
Yes.
with
Yeah.
and says, hey, this is what happened with Karolina. And
Yes.
wow, fantastic. I'm still
Yes.
there.
Yes.
And when someone looks at your practice and sees that you've got one associate that's been with you for 5 years and the other
Yeah.
one's been there for 7, they'll go, well, geez, she's doing something right.
Yeah.
So these are the intangibles that you can't
Absolutely.
really measure.
Yes.
But I think just the tangibles alone
Yeah.
are worth the investment on
For
a lot
sure.
of
And that's
of
the
these.
thing. And I think, you're never going to, and I guess talking about tangible investments, like any investment in yourself and your learning is never going to be lost, right? Especially if it's something that you're
Yeah.
interested in. I think it's always going to be worthwhile. So,
Mm.
but no, I don't ever do a cost benefit analysis on every
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, some courses you get out, you're like, well, I wouldn't practice, I wouldn't start treating like that on Monday or anything. And other courses, like, you're like, oh, can't wait, for the next thing. So,
And
yeah.
are you somebody that either encourages or actually contributes to the courses that
Yeah.
your whole staff do? Like, are
Both.
you?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
part of our employment contract is that we allocate study leave and
Yep.
paid sort of paid amount towards courses. And depending on
Right.
how senior people are, they get more
Mm.
courses. Because in my head, I see you as a senior osteopath, you have a bigger voice at the clinic. So I would expect for you to do more courses and more
Mm.
learning and then pass that on.
And is
Um,
that something you all discuss together, or is it something that someone comes to you and says, "Hey, there's this really great course I want to do. Can I do that?" Or
Generally,
is,
yeah. It's
yeah,
generally led by the practitioner that sort of highlights things.
yeah,
Yeah. So, and I think
yeah,
it works pretty well. And I think it's really important to have this network too,
mm,
because I think people forget, what's out there in the greater community. So I find it really good. Every time I do a
yeah,
course, you connect with other osteopaths and you think
yeah.
about your job that you do every day in a different light. Yeah.
Okay. And when you go to decide on what course to do,
Yes.
and what are some of the things that you look at to go, yes, this is a great course, and yes,
Yes.
this is the right person that I'm doing the course with. Like, talk to us about the horse and talk to us about the jockey.
Yes. I guess it depends. I think a lot of courses that I've been excited about going to recently, I've seen them advertised maybe for a couple of years before I've taken the leap.
Yeah.
That probably is a big one. I think, like I'm doing the Your Two Jugs course, the mastitis rescue
Oh,
course
right.
at the moment, online one.
Okay.
And that, like Elise Foley, for example, I've known of her for a while. I've seen her things. She markets, the brand quite
Yep.
well. So finally she had a Black Friday sale and I was like, yes, I'm doing it. The credit card's taking a beating. I'm doing it. So I'm really enjoying that. What was the other one? Amanda Hannaford. So you can tell where I'm at. I love female health. I really do.
Yep. Yep.
But the mastectomy sort of course, that was
Hmm.
brilliant. And, it came out with a whole new sense of what I'm doing. And I don't think I've seen any mastectomy cases since, but I'm excited when one knocks on my door
Right.
because that was a really well delivered course as well.
Hello, everyone. Just a quick break to give you some information on where to best find me. The first place is the private Facebook group called the Successful Practitioner Pathway. I've set up this private group as a place where practitioners can go and get tips and advice on how to best accelerate their practice and improve their clinical practice skills. The second place to find me is at successinpractice.net. That is where the Success in Practice signature program is housed. You can find more information about me and how I can best help you achieve success in your practice. So, the two best places, the private Facebook group, the Successful Practitioner Pathway, and successinpractice.net. I will link to both those places in the show notes. So, for more information, please see the show notes. Now, enjoy and back to the show. Yeah.
So I guess and both of those courses I've probably been thinking about for a couple of years before I actually committed.
Yeah. Well, it seems like also that you talked about the courses, but I mean, I asked you about the jockey as well.
Yes.
I know Amanda. I mean, we studied at the same university. I think Amanda was a year ahead of me, so we were kind of close together. And she's a very competent practitioner who's gone on to do some good things with, I think,
Amazing. And
yeah,
again, very almost
post
philosophical in
surgical.
her approach
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
The way she talks about managing scars and things, it's very
Mm,
much that, that real core
mm.
osteopathic-esque conversation, which is
Yeah,
really
and
cool.
she's been practicing for, for over 20 years. And so I think one of the things that I look for, and I guess a piece of advice for people out there, is that it's important that the person that you're that's teaching the course, that's delivering the course, has actually produced results in the real
Yes,
world
yes,
in the thing that they're teaching you.
yes,
You
for
know,
sure. Yes,
if you're doing a course with somebody who is just doing courses,
yep,
I would be hesitant to do that.
yes,
You want to
for
do a
sure.
course with somebody who is practicing what they do,
Absolutely.
who's applying it in practice, who's seeing enough of a volume of those patients to actually be an authority in that space.
Yes,
So I get a bit cautious when people say, do this course because they have this title or they have this kind of, I'm more of looking for somebody who do this course because I've been doing this for the last 20 years. We've seen these amount of patients. These are the results that we get, and you can kind of do your own. I mean, we're a small profession where you could still do your research on a
yes,
particular person.
yep, for sure.
You could actually ring around and speak to people and say, hey, what's this person like? How are they practicing? Do they get the results that they say that they get? And I guess, yeah, that's because I think that's really exploding. The
Yes.
the course delivery is something that's really exploding, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's great that it's
It's a good
exploding.
thing. I don't know,
I think it's
especially after
fantastic.
COVID when it all went dry and there was nothing, and then
Yeah,
you were trawling the OA website for their e-learning just to find something. And bummer,
yeah,
I learned that I did that last year because there was no new content at that time. Like it's been so, and I think that's probably why I've been probably doing way more courses than my 25 hours of CPD that I need to do, because
mm,
it's just really nice to be back into it and to connect with other osteopaths and start learning again.
yeah,
So I
definitely.
think it's really good, yeah. And I think it's
Yeah,
also good to have all these avenues because I think
mm,
osteo, one of its limitations is that we don't have enough course pathways for all the different things. And a lot of the greats are self-taught that they've had to, like
mm,
Louise Bibby was on a few, and she just did so much of her own research, her own
mm,
driving, her own, well, like not everyone has the stamina to be able to do that. It's also
yeah.
good to create courses that can sort of pave a way for you and
Yeah, It's
maybe
a, it's
meet a
a
Louise Bibby or something like that along the way.
yeah, it's a
To
shortcut.
show the path. Yeah,
It's a shortcut for you. I mean,
for sure.
people have invested time, lots of time and lots of money to kind of learn what they're doing, and then you go and pay for that course, and it's the biggest shortcut.
Yes.
I've always even been an advocate of just I would I mean I know in the past when I wanted to learn something of somebody who's an expert in that field, I've actually contacted them and paid for their time to sit and
Yeah.
have a chat with them for 2 hours,
But
just a one-on-one
people are
chat.
just happy with a coffee.
Yeah,
I've got a
yeah,
friend who's a physio. It's the best $4 I've ever spent in my life. He gave me so
yeah,
many insights about business and stuff. People are like allied health business owners are more than willing, and they're busy people, but for people
mm,
that actually care about what they're doing and want better, they're more than willing to give up their time, do you know? So I think it's
yeah,
about sort of putting yourself out there and be like, hey, like you're interesting. I really respect what you're doing here. Can we catch up for a coffee or whatever it might be? Which I
definitely
don't think
do
we do
that.
enough.
No,
Four
definitely.
dollars, maybe
Yeah,
five.
no, lots of
Easy.
lots of really good courses out there. I think just do your research on the person who's delivering the course. I know like John Marshall does some really
Yes.
good stuff, and he
Yeah.
brings out a lot of really good practitioners to come
Yes.
out and chat and
I've done a
teach.
fair few of his courses along the way. He's
Yeah,
great. Yeah.
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 So there's all that stuff, and but yeah, I think that's the main thing. Just make sure
It's,
that the person delivering has, like you mentioned, Jade Scott, and Jade's really cut her teeth in business and has probably invested more money than uh, anyone else in this profession on actually on business development and
yes.
personal development and leadership. And so she's taken all that and kind of trying to give it to people. And so you got to look at that and say, well, there's somebody you could learn from.
Yeah.
It's not like she's just come out yesterday and just opened a business back in
Of course.
2020 and said, "Oh, I made it through COVID, and
She's
now I
done the
want to
reps,
teach you."
hey? Yeah.
Yeah, she's done the reps.
Yeah.
And I think, speaking to her on the podcast, she mentioned that she had a really tough time early on because she was one of the first kind of pioneers within our profession of that employee model.
Yeah.
And no matter what you think of that model, in terms of, I mean, I have my thoughts on it, but no matter what you think of that model, she's learnt about it, and she's done all the
Absolutely.
research and the numbers, and she's broken it down, and she can deliver it well. And you got to give it. So if you are somebody who's looking to move towards that model and move towards, I guess, more of a team building, culture building, leadership building type of
Yeah.
employment solution,
Yeah.
she's a great asset to our
Absolutely.
profession. She's
Yeah,
somebody that's the course you do,
for
right?
sure.
Um, and so yeah, that's great to have there within our profession. I think
Yeah.
the more the better, but
Yeah, and I
obviously,
honestly don't think there's enough John Marshalls, Jade Scotts. We need more people that are willing to,
yeah,
showcase their skills and be confident enough in their skills, and share it too.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, so I guess moving on to the last question.
Yes,
Tell us about the profession as a kind of. I want to talk to you about the wide profession of osteopathy, especially in
yes,
Australia. What do
yes,
you think are some of the challenges facing us now? What do you think is happening and presenting itself with some challenges to us?
yes,
And then where do you see the opportunity for osteopathy to grow in the next 10 years?
yes. I feel like I want to go to opportunities first, if that's
Sure. Yeah,
okay.
sure.
I do think we're very unique in what we deliver, as far as, soft tissue, patient contact, direct. No other modality really works like we do, particularly now. A lot of physios, we complain about our graduates not having skills in like soft tissue and stuff. I think physios, far worse than what we have. Plus, they also
Mm,
don't have the research and all those other things. So I think this is I think the consumer wants, hands-on
mm,
treatment. The consumer buys into that. And I think it's not, and this is where I feel like I might get myself in trouble, but I understand evidence-based, I understand all those things, but there also is, we have to meet the consumer, which is our patient, where
mm,
they are as well. Do you know? Yeah, little Granny X is not really going to sort of buy into, I have to do an exercise program for 6 weeks before I can feel better.
mm.
Granny X wants to feel better at least a little bit, or have a little suggestion that things might be better today. And I think that's something really unique that osteopathy can offer. And I think we should be really proud of that fact. And I think we should use that fact to our advantage, that we are quite different to the other professions of
Okay.
today.
Let me push
Sorry.
back a little bit. Let me push
Yes.
back a little bit and play
Yes.
devil's advocate. I don't disagree
Yes.
with you, but
Yeah.
this is a conversation. We're going to have a back and forth a little bit.
Okay.
So then
Be
why
kind.
not? So then why not see a myotherapist?
Oh, but we're so much more than that.
I mean, you
I
just
get
talked
it.
about
I get
you
it. No,
you
definitely,
know
definitely, yes. But I do think there's differences as well, right? I do think our
yeah.
skill set, our knowledge is very different. I'm going to sound like I'm not educated, but I also feel very strongly about this.
Well,
There's
tell
a
us what
big
you feel
difference.
strongly about. What's the difference? Like, I mean, I didn't ask you this question, and I guess I should. I've
Yes,
asked a lot of other people. If you've been
yes,
listening to the podcast, which you have been,
yes.
what is an osteopath, Carolina? Like,
Oh,
what
yeah, this is a big, very loaded question. Damn it, and I
Yeah.
should have known, because I feel like when I listen to your podcast, I'm like, it's like when you're watching like Wheel of Fortune or something, like, go that one, go that. Oh, I do think it's a model that we can use to help heal a human body. I don't know. But it is. It's a model. It's not necessarily a template. It's not a fit all. It's a way to approach the human body. And I do think that comes down to like the four pillars, that we sort of do have to look at the body as a whole. We have to sort of think about structure and function being quite intertwined, and that's how we get the best treatment outcomes for our
Right.
patients. So that's how I would consider
Right.
osteopathy.
So you're
Um,
saying osteopathy is defined by the principles and the philosophy that we think about rather than what it is that we do.
Definitely.
Right.
Yes. And I
Okay,
think that's
good.
maybe what sets us apart from the myos and the other professions
Exactly.
that do the same
Exactly.
things. Because we do think things a little yeah, we think of, as I said, patient X who has the neck sprain.
Yes.
I think an osteopath has already got has already got the detective hat on
Yeah.
at that said complaint, right? And maybe, especially with myotherapy, and again, I haven't done my research about myotherapy. They're all very clever, but I do think we dig a little bit deeper than that when we think about neck pain or whatever it
Yeah,
might
I
be.
mean, there might be a myotherapist out there who thinks like an osteopath, but it's
Yes,
not entrenched in they shouldn't be entrenched. Well, it's not entrenched in their education.
for
They have
sure.
to, they learn that as if they work with osteopaths or they go to a
Absolutely.
course or something,
And I
but,
think, yeah, and I
well,
think the
this is,
magic too is like with an osteo, like with a myotherapy, I'm guessing and again, this is probably short-minded. I haven't seen a myo in a
mm,
while, and I haven't looked at their coursework or anything like that. But I think in osteo, an osteo treatment can be so many different things. I don't think a myotherapy treatment can be all those different things.
mhm.
Maybe with certain practitioners, maybe blah, blah, blah. But I think the juice of an myotherapy versus an osteo can be quite different,
So you think the toolbox is wider with an osteopath?
for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So
But I
all
also think there's the philosophy and how we think about things,
is the
definitely
main.
changes it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So look, all very valid points what you discussed, and I guess I asked you these questions because I know you're there. Like I know that's it's inside you, and I'm just trying to get it out.
Yes.
So I guess okay. So you told us what you think an osteopath is, and
Yes.
I agree with you.
Yes.
And you said that one of the things that sets us apart is obviously that and our
Yes.
uniqueness,
Yes.
and you said that that's a real opportunity. How is it an opportunity? Like, where do you see that opportunity for us being the way that we are? Like, why is that a benefit in today's landscape and moving into the future?
Particularly because we can just meet patients where they are, and it's not necessarily to say, like, I don't believe in like hands-on treatment is the only treatment. I actually like I'm trained clinical Pilates. I believe a lot in movement and that movements contributing to health and movement and all those sorts of things. But so it's not that I want osteo to just be on the table all the time. Sorry, I forgot where I was going there. Just give me a minute, I'll get there.
Okay.
But it's about also the big thing is I think the consumer, which is the patient, which we forget. I don't think we
Mm,
like to use the word consumer, but that's what our, people that take up our services are consumers. And I
hmm.
think they really enjoy what an osteopath can provide. And I think that's quite different. I know how many times do you get an EPC that's written out to the physio?
Mm,
The patient goes, "Oh, I really just don't like physios." I just don't think osteos get that same they don't get that same kickback. And I think it's because people genuinely enjoy their time with an osteopath. They enjoy spending half an hour in a consult where they can, start off talking about their necks, but end up talking about their divorce.
mm.
And that makes us quite unique compared to the other professions out there. And I think we need to wave our hands around a little bit more in the profession or in amongst health to be like, GPs seeing patients like in smaller and smaller times that don't have the time and capacity to be able to give this beautiful health information and advice. But osteopaths,
Mm.
even chiropractors, like their consult times are more often are quite limited as well. They don't have the time to talk about how said divorce can be affecting this and that, or, all those sorts of things. And I think that's where we're in
Yeah.
a very unique space where we can provide
Well, I
beautiful.
don't think it's I don't think it's a time factor. I think it's more of it's a principle and philosophy factor. Because
Yes,
we look at the body, mind, and spirit,
for sure.
we are interested in somebody's current
Everything. Yes. Sure.
social situation
Yeah,
that places some stress on their system that
absolutely.
manifests itself into somatic
Yes.
dysfunction.
Yes.
And so we're interested in the divorce. We're interested in the stress at work. We're interested in the recent death they've had. We're
Yes.
interested in the Epstein-Barr virus that they contracted
Yes, for
6 months
sure.
ago. That's sitting
Yes.
there, kind of just buzzing away.
Yes.
So yeah, I understand what you're
And
saying
maybe that's
there.
maybe what I'm trying to say is like we are open-minded enough, right?
Yeah.
If
Well,
you
that's
saw a
but.
GP and sort of you mentioned, "Oh, I fractured my femur when I was seven,"
Hmm.
an like a GP, for example, probably wouldn't bat an eyelid about that. But suddenly an osteopath, we're so open-minded that we sort of go, "Okay, maybe that is
Yeah.
contributing to the ankle pain or the
Yeah.
whatever it is," And I think that's maybe the beauty of osteopathy as
Yeah, and
well.
like I said, it's not a time thing. It's not like the
Yes.
osteopath is allocated that time. It's more
Yes.
so that it's part of what we do. It's
Yes.
in our approach. It's in our philosophy. We have to be an osteopath, as the fourth principle states. You
Yes.
have to apply rational treatment based on the first three principles.
Yes, for
Like
sure.
it's already been defined for us. I don't know why
Yes.
we have to sit there and kind of redefine it all the time. But I guess the point I want to try to make along those lines as well is that part of that is to also not get stuck in a service based outlook, right?
Yes.
Like you just said, we're hands on, we sit there and we talk. It's like a package service.
Yes.
And I think we're moving towards that without even knowing that we're moving towards that. A lot of clinics are selling themselves that way.
Yep.
Is that, hey, we're osteopaths, we get our hands on you, we spend half an hour with you, we take a deep case history,
Yep.
we did, and it's like a package that the patient expects.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the patient wants a result.
True. Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
The
Yes.
patient is after the result, and I don't think they really care what it is that we're doing.
True.
They like to understand it, but
Yeah.
ultimately, if you can get them the result, they
True.
really care about that. And I think we need to go back to focusing on the result and
Yep.
using osteopathy to get the result,
Yeah.
rather than focusing on a service package.
I think this is going to open a whole can of worms too, but it's
Yeah.
also interesting because, with the regulations with APRA and stuff, I can't say I'm good at treating lower back pain, even though I can't tell you in any sort of advertisement that I can fix your back pain. So I can't tell you the result. I can say, and this is maybe why the clinics go around it, and maybe that's frustrating to you, but I think it's because we're a bit handcuffed by what we can and can't say. Because I'm
well, you can
I'm
say
very good. I could bring results, but I can't advertise it in any sort of platform that makes a difference. And I think that's where maybe we do have to, and that's where maybe we're limited. And I do think it's a point of difference too, that we can say, in said consult, like I still get patients sometimes that are like, oh, you actually treated me today. They're not just doing an assessment. And I do think that is something to advertise and something to talk about, because not every profession does that. And if that's something that we can say with confidence, with APRA regulations and all that, then I don't see the problem in that.
Yeah. I think to bring a patient to you, it's good to have that as a selling point.
Yes.
But to keep the patient, you got to get the result for them.
Absolutely. And I think that's hopefully goes without.
Yeah. And not only to keep the patient, but to keep the patient and get that patient to be a beacon for you, to refer other people.
Sure.
It's based on, it's like, okay, let's say said patient comes in, you tell them this is the service package you're going to get.
Yes.
They get it.
Yes.
But they're not really, they didn't really get the result they're after. They're not going to go and talk about you.
Of course. Yeah.
But if you get the result for them, no one remembers the package. They remember the result, and they go and they rant and rave. And
absolutely.
And that's, I think, we need to focus on making sure we don't forget that we're about results, and we're about using osteopathy to get the results. And that's really the beauty of it.
Yes, for sure.
So you've talked about some of the opportunities ahead of us. Do you see that, I guess, maybe losing that is a challenge for us? Like, is that something that, I guess, losing the uniqueness?
Yes.
You said the osteopathy is unique in terms of its approach.
I do think so, yeah. And again, it depends on the practitioner. And I do think it's really great that as an osteopath, you can do so many things. And they're obviously exposing our students to a lot more things than I was exposed to. But I do think, it is something worth honouring and preserving, because I do think it still has a very, the private practice osteopath still has a very important place in health. And I think that's really important. And I think that's my sort of a little impression of what I love, that we're diversifying. I love that, and I understand that because we are a small profession, we do have to go into these different arenas in order to stay on the board, right? I totally understand that. And I'm very grateful to OA for creating these opportunities. Like aged care, OC rehab wasn't even a thing when I started. But I also think it's worth making sure that, we're also looking after this avenue, that we're also looking after private practice, because GPs love us. We're stopping people from going to hospital. We're helping, the greater community. And that's what we should be all about.
Yeah. I think also some of those things that you described, like aged care and OC health, I think they've been really pioneered by osteopaths. Like, everything that we've gotten from the ground up rather than from the top down. Like I know Heath Williams has done a great job in the OC rehab space. And so, pushing into that space really requires that you want to just get there, and you've got this kind of blind resolution to get there. And then that opens the door for other people. Louise Bibby's done some great things, like I said, with the Sports Trainer Network. that she's developed, and a lot of
Yeah.
the rural opportunities she's given to other
Yeah.
osteopaths. So they've been trails that have blazed by osteopaths,
Yeah.
and hopefully the association picks up on those and kind of takes the ball and runs with it,
Absolutely.
which they've done in some situations. So, are there any challenges that you think are there facing us in the next 10 years? That yeah,
I do think
anything in education or anything in that we're
I do
missing
think if we
out on?
can't find osteopaths that are willing to stay for a long time, I think it's going to be very hard to grow a profession. And I
Yeah.
think, like anything, if we can't grow, we may die.
So
So
retention.
yeah, so that's something that definitely concerns
Mm,
me a little bit. Um, yeah, I think that's a really, really big thing. Um, and as well, it's sort of, as you said, it's like you can't really be wonderful at your craft if you haven't done it for 5+ years. And if
oh
we're
yeah.
not having osteopaths land that milestone, then I
Mm,
do think that in 5 years' time, people are going to be looking around going, I've heard this osteo thing is great, but where are they? Because they're not going to
mm,
exist anymore. So I
mm.
think that's something that sort of scares me a little bit. And I do think that's something that we should sort of all really focus on. I think when I spoke to Jade last, I think she was talking about an 8-month retention for osteopaths at the moment. Like,
Wow,
it's terrible. Like, and you
that's
don't.
awful.
I
It's
just think in
awful.
my head, I'm like, I'm sure I couldn't crack a neck confidently when I was eight months,
Mm,
new grad. Like I didn't even know half the skills. I didn't really understand the job, and people are already deciding to walk away before they've really understood it. So that I think is a challenge, and I think that's something that we really need to focus on, because I think
yeah.
without it, we're going to be in trouble. And I think that's the thing too. Without it, clinics aren't profitable. Without profitable clinics, we can't provide jobs. Without
Mm,
jobs, people won't be signing up to osteo courses. And without osteo courses and students, then we're all nothing, right? We're dust. So that's my concern. And I think that's something that we need to focus on. And I think the only way that we can do that is really talk about positive osteo job experiences, talk
mm.
about that you can be in a really long lasting job and really enjoy your job. And, we all get burnt out from time to time, but there's no reason to walk away. And there's skills to learn and there's things that we can do to combat that. Like any job, every job has its
Yeah.
occupational hazards.
Well, look, if you're a new graduate and you're wondering what is it that these osteopaths are doing who are making money and have been practicing for more than 10 years and are happy, like find those osteopaths and
For
see what they're
sure.
doing. Like it's
Absolutely.
not difficult.
No.
And I bet you that none of them are doing exercise physiology.
Yeah.
I bet you that none of them are doing, isolating
Sure
body
they are
parts
able
and
to if they're really into it. But, I also think, I don't know. And I
well,
think
but they're
I think
practicing
you've got to find your
osteopathy,
tribe in osteo too, and I think that's where you've got to search around different clinics because there'd be other clinics that I'm sure if I started at another clinic, I probably wouldn't be here today. If they didn't speak my
Hmm,
language, so to speak, I wouldn't be here today. But I think that's like true of every course direction that you go in. You need to find people that are like-minded. You need to find people that, believe in the same passions as you do. And I
hmm.
think if you find it, it's magic, really.
Yeah,
Um,
look, you need to find. You're right. You need to find like-minded people. My point on that was that I think there's a beauty to practicing osteopathy in the classical sense
yes.
that helps you understand the stuff that you're gonna all the courses that you're about to do. If you don't have that base,
Yeah.
right, you're not going to appreciate them really well.
Sure. Yeah.
And so like I said, the people that have been practicing for a long time, 10, 15 plus years, making a good income, because I guess that's why people are leaving, because
Yes.
they can't make a great income,
Yeah.
right? They feel anxious about treatment. They don't know
Yeah.
what to do,
Yeah.
right? And they feel like they've been let down by either their education or just their current situation that they're
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
And so if you want to combat those, just
Yeah.
find the people that are making a great income,
Yes.
seeing patients head over heels,
Yeah.
very busy, and are still doing what they love to do,
Yeah.
10, 15 years plus.
Yeah.
And I don't know of anyone that's not practicing osteopathy. Like if you find those people, they're generally practicing using the principles that you discussed.
Yeah.
They're looking at the body they're having those conversations and learning about the patient's divorce and the patient's stress and the patient's,
Yes.
they're hands-on, they're structural, they've got good manipulative skills, they're really investing in their growth. that's what you're seeing, right?
Yeah.
You're not seeing somebody who's saying, no, the evidence doesn't support
Yes.
this, so I'm not going to touch a patient.
Sure.
You're not seeing somebody that's just purely gone into aged care and that's all they
Yes.
want to do.
Yes.
You're not seeing somebody, that's my point, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you want to, success leaves clues.
Yes, for sure.
And once you find the clues, you'll find the success and just follow it. Follow the rainbow to the pot of gold.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. Well, Karolina, it's been a pleasure.
Sorry, 2 hours of your time.
No, we're just over 2 hours, 2 hours and 5
I
minutes.
honestly thought, I'm like, what is Sammy going to talk to me about? I'm so nothing, but I do love our profession.
It's something. It's a Seinfeld episode. It's something. It's definitely something. It's not nothing.
Yes, that's very true.
It's an episode about something.
No, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
So if there's any budding students in the West, if they want to do some obs or want to learn what a great osteo career is,
yep,
hook me up. I will chat to you. I'll chat your ear off.
Yeah.
So,
go and see Karolina.
Yes.
Okay, Karolina, it's been an absolute pleasure. Hang on the line with me.
Thank you.
We'll stay on and have a little chat after we're done.
So much.
But for everyone else, thank you for joining me on another episode. We'll be back again next week. Have a good evening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.